Chapter 676. Fairy Dream Tower. The hall fell into a brief silence. After a while, Belarga asked uncertainly, "You say you want to go to war with Eight Peaks Mountain, for what purpose?" Belarga's lineage came from Eight Peaks Mountain. As the rightful heir, he had been reduced to such a state. Every moment, he thought of one day returning to Eight Peaks Mountain and reclaiming all that he had lost. But he knew how difficult it was. Even if only the reserves of Eight Peaks Mountain were mobilized, it would be enough to wipe out any race under the artillery fire. Dong Jiao picked up the dwarf's special roasted tea and took a gentle sip. She said in a low voice, "The Eight Peaks Mountain is currently raiding surrounding cities for reasons we don't yet know, but this will soon threaten the security of our territories. Therefore, we cannot sit by and wait for death, we must prepare to fight against the enemy." Raiding the surrounding? How could that be possible? Rune wouldn't do such a foolish thing. Belarga stroked his beard, murmuring to himself. Whether Rune would or not is not our matter to discuss. This time, Master Fang Hao asked me to ask you about the progress on the blueprint for the rifles. Dong Jiao interrupted his thoughts. Actually, the reason is simple. The transmigrators now represent a special significance. Under the advice of the transmigrators, the Eight Peaks Mountain jumped from creating a hand cannon to making a bolt-action rifle. Such a leap in technology would make any power tempted. Now that the dwarves' internal situation has stabilized, it's not surprising that they want more transmigrators. Ah, we have completely copied a rifle, and the blueprint is being inscribed. Belarga answered immediately. Copying the rifle, inscribing the blueprint. These were things Fang Hao had left them to accomplish before he left. This time they were going to war with the dwarves, and naturally, they could not lag too far behind in terms of weapons. Otherwise, even if they could win, the losses would be heavier. Therefore, the blueprint of Belarga's rifle became a critical step. Hearing that it hasn't been produced yet, Dong Jiao's expression became a bit serious. She sensed that the dwarves were too slow, but due to her status, she didn't want to make too critical of a comment. She continued to ask, "So, how many more days until it is completed?" Belarga quickly calculated the time, 3 days, it can be completed in 3 days. Dong Jiao opened the Book of Lords and informed Fang Hao of this message. After receiving a response, she continued, "Good, I'll come for you in 3 days, and at that time I'll bring you along. I need a detailed map of the Eight Peaks Mountain City and its fortress." Belarga nodded, "All right." After stating the situation, Dong Jiao didn't linger around. She rode the bone dragon into the sky and left the Bloody Mountains range. It was late at night. Eight Peaks Mountain, Grey Iron City. The city was built against the mountain, occupying an excellent defense position. The towering city walls were cast into an iron-grey color. The thickness of the city wall was good at 10 meters wide, covered with various defensive implements. From the back of the city, ding-ding-dong-dong sounds of work echoed into the night. On a huge stone mountain, countless craftsmen were working through the night. They were carving a statue of the 7th king, Rune. In the royal palace, King Rune, dressed in a red robe with golden borders, wore a crown on his head. His wine-red beard hung down to his knees. Sitting on his throne, his aura was strong, commanding respect. Standing below were the high-ranking officials of Eight Peaks Mountain discussing the upcoming plans. "Your Majesty, up until today, we have captured 72 transmigrators, all of whom have been registered and documented. We have also harvested a large amount of resources from their territories." A dwarf in a brocade robe stepped forward and said loudly. Rune maintained an expressionless face while sitting on his throne. After the dwarf reported, he continued to ask, "Are there any people with special skills?" As soon as he asked, another dwarf stood up. He spoke loudly, "Your Majesty, 7 of them possess skills in agriculture, architecture, and healing. The other transmigrators don't have any special skills so far, and all have been assigned to the armory to manufacture weapons. Finding people with special skills to supplement the labor force." This was the purpose of the dwarves attacking the transmigrators' cities. Through the simplification of the transmigrators, the dwarves produced bolt-action rifles. The dwarves were very surprised at the transmigrators' knowledge and abilities. After solving their internal conflicts, Rune immediately ordered the start of attacks on all neighboring transmigrators' cities. Capturing transmigrators. Those with special skills will be assigned work according to their skills. Those without useful skills will be sent directly to the armory to non-disruptively manufacture weapons for the dwarves. Producing weapons and implements through the Book of Lords, transmigrators were able to accelerate production much faster than the dwarves. It takes 3 days to make a rifle and even longer to make a cannon. Up to several months. But in the hands of the transmigrators, as long as the materials met the standards, weapons could be made instantly. The disadvantage of the dwarves is their sparse population. Their advantage is clear, the power of their firearms is immense. If their firearms could develop rapidly, the dwarves would also usher in a new future under his rule. Therefore, the first step for Rune after securing the throne was to capture the transmigrators. Hearing the reports of his subjects, Rune stroked his beard and let out a hearty laugh. Haha, good, inform everyone to increase the attack speed. Consolidate all the remaining transmigrators together before the onset of winter to prepare for next year's plans, Rune commanded loudly. Chapter 677. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone below bowed in unison. Just as Rune was in a good mood, planning to end this temporary meeting. Urgent and clear footsteps were heard coming from the side corridor. Soon after, a guard walked in with large strides and declared loudly, Your Majesty, the leader of the 3rd Brigade is back and says he has crucial news to report. Rune knitted his brows, the circumstances must be pressing for somebody to barge in with a report. Let him in. The guard withdrew, and a dwarf clad in full armor strode in. After paying his respects, he said with a grim face, Your Majesty, not a single person from the squad of 300 cavalrymen sent to pursue Deng Bin has returned. What? What do you mean by has not returned? Rune's expression turned stern once more. He knew of Deng Bin. Both sides have exchanged many things. But to his understanding, Deng Bin's stronghold wasn't strong. With the dwarves' capabilities, taking this city would be without any pressure. The lower-ranking officer had broken into a sweat, lapping his dry lips. He continued saying, Your Majesty, I immediately arranged for an investigation. In the eastern woods close to the desolate battlefield, we found the bodies of the disappeared cavaliers, along with human bodies and a large pile of bones. So you are saying all 300 men are dead, are you? Rune's voice became increasingly low, filled with brewing anger. Dwarves could die. There were already many people who died in the war. But the death of 300 cavalrymen due to chasing a band of fleeing transmigrators was something Rune would not tolerate. The leader swallowed hard, continued saying, We suspect that the transmigrators from the east must have rescued them. Otherwise, Deng Bin's people don't have the strength to kill our cavalry. The complete annihilation of the 300 men suggested the enemy's strength. Rune's face remained gloomy, but his expression did not reveal much. He was silent for a moment. For this matter, you have failed in leading the troops. We will remove your position as the leader. You may leave. Yes. The leader wiped away his sweat and withdrew. Rune's gaze swept across everyone below again and continued, Hester, you will take over the command of the 3rd Brigade. Arrange for scouts to investigate the city in the east. I need a detailed report within 3 days. Hester was a man with red cropped hair. He stepped forward and accepted his command loudly, Yes, Your Majesty. Rune nodded, All right, let's wrap it up for today. Accelerate the attack. Yes, Your Majesty. As the crowd dispersed, Rune also turned and walked towards the back. Throughout the night, dozens of cavalry scouts set off from Grey Iron City towards the east. Wow! 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 Several days later, Fang Hao, Anjia, and Lori. They stood below the towering walls of the city, exclaiming in amazement. After a few days of travel, the team from Lyss City had finally arrived at the Federation's power center city, Silver Wing City. The grey walls of the city were grand and lofty, extending as far as the eye could see. The masonry of the walls was perfectly aligned, and they had been coated in a grey lime wash. There were flags of Silver Wing City and the Federation on the city wall, while patrol soldiers occasionally looked down from above. You could faintly see dozens of defensive machines. Lookout towers soaring into the clouds. Any approaching party would have a hard time escaping the line of sight of the lookout towers. My goodness, this truly was an impregnable fortress. Not to mention the defense mechanisms they could currently see were well arranged. And as the power center of the Federation, there would certainly be hidden measures. It wasn't possible for all defenses to be displayed in the open. Sir, the procedures have been completed, you can enter the city now. At this moment, a guard approached. Good. Fang Hao got back on the carriage. The palanquin was pulled in, and the carriage entered the city gate. Fang Hao pulled a crack in the curtain and curiously looked outside. The smooth road was more than 10 meters wide enough for 2 coaches to pass each other without causing any congestion. There were stone bricks laid out on the road, with pedestrian paths on both sides. Yet, the city inhabitants didn't seem bothered by the presence of the troops. As if such an arrival was considered a normal routine. The carriage moved straight into a private inn, which had quite a large compound. The accommodation was more than enough for their stay. They got off the carriage and everyone started unloading their belongings. Rebecca also alighted the carriage and said in a low voice, "I lost all my stuff. According to our agreement, now that we are in Silver Wing City, you need to settle half of the pay for the mercenaries." "Okay, any plans later? Would you like to have lunch together?" Fang Hao smiled and looked at her. Rebecca rolled her eyes at him, then blinked flirtatiously, "I have some things to prepare. I'm going to visit some friends tonight. If you are bored, you can take Angia for a walk, this place is far more bustling than Belice's city." "Oh, all right then." Fang Hao felt a little disheartened. The two stood to the side, chatting. In the meantime, Dmitrija led the others in thoroughly checking the entire accommodation. They also arranged for corresponding patrol duties. Even though they were here, it was not as safe as their own territory. It was essential to foresee and prepare for any possible dangers. After the inspection work was done, everyone returned to their own rooms. Lunch followed soon after. Chapter 678. Fang Hao led Angia, Aseti, and 2 guards out of their residence. They hailed a carriage by the roadside and headed towards a nearby commercial street. It was not easy to come here for once. They also wanted to stroll around, after all, they'd been on the road for nearly a month. The carriage entered the vicinity of the commercial street. It began to slow down, the outside was bustling, mixed with the sounds of hawking. When they got to the edge of the street, it became difficult for the carriage to proceed any further. Fang Hao simply had the carriage stop and they sauntered over. They walked ahead and quickly entered the bustling commercial street. Shops were lined up on both sides of the road, and many merchants stood by the roadside, selling their goods. Among them, Fang Hao saw that transmigrators were selling some small items they had made. It seemed that they had thoroughly integrated into this world. They walked and walked. In Angia's hand, a large handful of snacks had appeared. While walking, she stuffed them into Fang Hao and Aseti's mouths. Although this street was prosperous, it was not much different from Lys's city. The types of shops did not offer anything special either. The group made idle chatter. They arrived at the center of the commercial street, beneath a 3-story building. The building was named the Fairy Dream Tower. The name Fairy Dream Tower was filled with a strong oriental flavor. Either the place was run by a transmigrator, or a transmigrator had helped in naming it. Most of the people entering and leaving were upper-class women, it seemed to be a place that catered to women. "Let's go, let's take a look inside." Fang Hao led the group in, and upon looking up, saw a handsome male shop assistant greeting customers. When he saw Fang Hao and the others enter, the man paused. Then he walked over with a smile, "Welcome, take a look around. If there's anything you fancy, just let me know. I'll give you a discount as we're all one of us." The shop assistant was very enthusiastic and ignored the other female customers, sticking to Fang Hao's side. "Did you open this shop?" "I don't have that ability. This shop was opened by Sister Li. I lost my turf, and just as Sister Li was hiring, I decided to come and help." The male shop assistant said casually. Sister Li. Being able to own such a large shop here, Sister Li's abilities were indeed extraordinary. "We are all here to help each other, yes." "Yes, you're absolutely right." The group continued to walk at a leisurely pace. Angia and Aseti were already being attracted by the items in the shop. The first floor sold cosmetics like lipstick, eyeshadow, face cream, and many other items Fang Hao couldn't identify. This Sister Li must be quite skilled at making these items. Being able to produce these items after coming over to this place, she really is quite impressive. "Does this place only sell cosmetics?" "This floor sells cosmetics, the second floor has various women's clothing, and the third floor has jade and jewelry. Sister Li is very capable. Pretty much all the women in this city have their business handled by our Fairy Dream Tower." The male assistant came even closer. "As you also know, once you become wealthy, you attract more envious wolves. Otherwise, Sister Li's business could be even bigger. She's that powerful, hey? Isn't she just? Let me tell you, in my heart, Sister Li is the commercial version of Fang Hao. You haven't seen Sister Li negotiate with the big bosses in the city. She was just like a scene out of a movie. The shop assistant said excitedly. Perhaps because she had helped him and also due to her real achievements, he had great admiration for Sister Li. Well, that's indeed impressive. Chapter 679. Hey! Angia pulled on the waiter, causing him to stagger, before asking, what is this? Oh, this is a serum, for skin care. And this one? This is an eyeliner pencil for drawing eye lines. Angia kept asking about several items, and the waiter patiently answered her. He could see their hero attributes. As soon as Fang Hao entered, he had a blue and an orange hero with him, which undoubtedly represented the terrifying strength of the person in front of him. So, even if the other party had many questions, he still answered them. Fang Hao looked at Angia who kept asking questions. There were so many types that he didn't even know what to buy. He then turned to the waiter and said, do you have any gift sets? Yes, we have gift sets over here that include foundation, eyebrow pencil, eyeshadow, a full set of makeup. Of course, the price is a bit higher. The waiter pulled out a wooden box the size of a lunch box from a shelf nearby. The box clearly had Flower Fairy Honey written on it. When opened, it contained neatly arranged various types of makeup. What if we don't know how to use it? Fang Hao continued to ask. Don't worry about that. As long as you come to the store and learn, we will teach you. It's very simple and you can learn quickly, the store worker explained with a smile. He then pointed to the side where another female store worker was teaching a noble lady how to use makeup. How much does it cost? The store worker directly said, 3 gold coins for each box. 3 gold coins. Good heavens, a box of makeup was enough to buy several slaves. But now he was rich and powerful, so he didn't mind spending that much. He started counting the number of people in his mind. Rebecca, Angia, Ira, Dong Jiayu, and the maids in the territory. As he counted, the number already exceeded 70 and was still increasing. Seeing Fang Hao keeping silent, the store worker thought that the price was too expensive for him. He then offered, I can give you a discount. Fang Hao was surprised, oh, thank you. But because of the interruption, he forgot how many people he had counted so far. Anyway, it was less than 100. Okay, prepare 100 boxes for me. What, 100 boxes? The store worker was taken aback. This must be a wholesale purchase. Ah, so you don't have enough stock. No, please wait a moment, I will have someone prepare them immediately. There was no such thing as not having enough stock. The store worker wished he could buy all the goods in the store. At that time, he could also earn a lot of commission. After paying, Fang Hao asked the store worker to deliver the goods directly to the inn where they were staying. Fang Hao continued to the second floor with his group. According to the store worker, the second floor sold clothes. As soon as they stepped onto the second floor, the atmosphere was instantly much quieter. Only young women were present, and by the number of people, it seemed that the clothing here was also quite popular. However, the popularity could not compete with the cosmetics downstairs. Fang Hao came to a shelf on one side, and immediately saw dresses hung on the wall. Some were separate tops and skirts, and some were one-piece dresses. But the styles resembled the ancient Eastern Hanfu. Only a few dresses were the type worn by the locals here, and according to store workers, they were not produced by the shop itself. This was in contrast with his Bone Textile store's clothing styles. The Bone Textile store primarily focused on shaping and sculpting the body, but the style was more modern or Western. The ethereal style here was indeed beautiful, but it seemed that the locals had not yet accepted it. You two also pick some out, I will pay when we leave, Fang Hao said. Angia pulled a settee towards one side to pick the clothes she liked. But they didn't dare to wander too far, fearing Fang Hao might encounter danger. Fang Hao walked around and his eyes landed on a sky blue long dress with silver line patterns. The style was very beautiful, and the material was high-quality silk. It was both lively for young girls and mature and graceful for older women. It was quite suitable for Rebecca, the ageless woman. The boss has a good eye, this dress was embroidered one stitch at a time. I visited the factory, and I heard that it takes several weeks to embroider one. The store worker sought to flatter post the purchase of 100 boxes of Flower Fairy Honey. Pack it up. Okay. After that, he chose different colored dresses for Ira, Little White, and Rolina from the side. All were high-quality silk, which would feel and look very comfortable when worn. As Fang Hao continued to stroll around, he was stunned by what he saw next. A belly band. Good heavens, they even sold such things here. He looked around, and since he was already here, he selected a few belly bands and asked the store clerk to pack them up. Boss, take care. May you earn big money, we welcome you to come again next time. The store worker escorted them all the way to the door and spoke respectfully. He had earned enough this time to cover his earnings for several months. He was so happy that his smile almost reached his ears. He hoped that this golden master would come back again to shop. Okay then, goodbye. Fang Hao nodded and continued on with his group. The Fairy Dream Tower was indeed the most characteristic store on this street. The other jewelry stores and clothing stores were rather dull in comparison. There was no novelty and no desire to buy anything. Lacking the motivation to continue shopping, Fang Hao and his group decided to find a place to eat dinner and then return to the inn. They leisurely strolled down the street, taking in the festive atmosphere along the way. Chapter 680. As they noticed a nice tavern, Angia exclaimed in surprise, "Hey! Look, there's a bird perched on that person's shoulder." Fang Hao followed Angia's gaze. He saw a line of guards approaching from the roadside. The man at the front was tall, clad in black and gold armor, a sword hung at his waist, and a longbow strapped to his back. What has surprised Angia was, on his right shoulder, a green parrot almost as big as an owl was perched. The market was noisy, but Angia's shout seemed to have reached the man across the street, who turned his gaze towards them. Not wanting to stir any trouble, Fang Hao quickly said, "Esteemed leader, we mean no harm." It was not out of fear of the man, but because whispering about someone in a low voice was somewhat inappropriate. Furthermore, it became even more embarrassing because the man overheard them. Angia explained, "I was just curious about your bird, no other meaning." The man, clad in black armor, made a clinking noise with each step due to the collision of his armor pieces. After sizing up Fang Hao and the others, he asked quietly, "Just entered the city? Show me your identity tokens. Get down, drop your weapons." As soon as the man opened his mouth, the parrot on his shoulder began to loudly squawk. The sudden shrill sound startled Fang Hao and the rest. The Lionheart Knight behind them was on the verge of drawing his sword. "Shut up," the man shook his shoulder. The parrot fluttered its wings a bit, then flew back onto the man's shoulder, again crying out, "Catch the thief, catch the thief." Ah! Fang Hao, his companions, and the bystanders, they all looked at the parrot. But the guards behind the man seemed utterly used to this, showing no reaction. Meanwhile, they were checking the entry tokens of Fang Hao and the others. When they learned that they came from Lyss City for the council meeting, they didn't make any further difficulties. Angia, however, walked up as if very familiar with the man, looking at the parrot and said, "Your bird seems a bit dumb." The man laughed embarrassingly, "I bought it at the market. I thought it was very clever and could mimic human speech, but it keeps babbling nonsense all day." After the check of the entry tokens was completed, they didn't give them any more hard time. Fang Hao, standing at the entrance of the tavern, politely suggested, "May I invite you all for a meal?" "No, thank you. We still need to patrol. There've been too many strangers in the city lately. As you've bought so much, you'd better return early in the evening." "All right, thank you." The man nodded again and continued on his way with his subordinates. Fang Hao and the others then entered the tavern. They ordered a table of dishes and began to eat. Well fed and watered, the sky began to darken. They again looked at the bounty notices posted in the tavern. Seeing nothing special, they returned to their dwelling with everyone. The commercial street was still bustling. Numerous carriages gathered in the streets, making this place even busier than usual. In Dragon Soaring and Swallow Tavern, the city's largest tavern, bursts of laughter emanated from a luxurious private room from time to time. The city's dignitaries who had arrived at Silver Wing City were drinking and making merry in the tavern. This tavern was previously called Dragon Tooth Pub. It was renamed Dragon Soaring and Swallow Tavern after renovations 2 months ago. In a private room on the 3rd floor, Grote's butler, holding a glass of wine, looked at the bustling street below. The party from Lyss City entered the city in the morning. "I'm afraid this matter will be difficult to handle now." In the private room sat a middle-aged mercenary, dressed like a small businessman. The mercenary said, "Who would have thought that they didn't drink the tea? We had no choice but to retreat. We almost got caught by their scout as we were leaving." The butler, hearing this, was filled with rage. He sat back down, slamming the wine glass on the table. That's not what you said when we hired you. You told us all about the idea of poisoning them through the tea stall, saying it was so meticulous. But at the end of the day, people get slashed, and it doesn't slow them down at all. The mercenary was hired by the butler. Officially a mercenary, but he also did things similar to a bandit. Barely anyone dared to accept the task of attacking the Lyss city forces. Ah! In their team, there must have been someone who discovered something was amiss with the cold tea, which led the whole troop to avoid drinking it, thus resulting in humph. I don't want to hear about this. My master gave me a good scolding because of it. If your captain really wants to shake off his current situation, he should show his real skills, not just brag every day. Yes, I'll relay this to the captain. The butler leaned back in his chair and continued, Lyss city has already been infiltrated. The city guards, too, have started to set up their surveillance in the vicinity. It's improbable to kidnap Rebecca without a trace. My master wants you to change your target first. Oh? Please elaborate, sir. The new lord of Lyss city, is the puppet husband newly supported by Rebecca. Rebecca isn't easy to deal with, you can deal with him first. If her husband dies, Lyss city will be without a city lord, the council will naturally have an excuse to force her to step down. At that time, my master will take advantage of this opportunity to make some moves. The mercenary slowly nodded, continuing to ask, so this puppet city lord, what's his current strength, and how's his defense force around him? A young man in his 20s, even if he has some strength, it definitely won't be too high. He's a pretty little white face, which has obtained Rebecca's favor. There should be some guards around him, but not many. The butler continued. Oh, in that case, there should be no problem. Rest assured, sir. The mercenary assured him confidently. Capturing Rebecca alive in the city would indeed be a bit difficult. But if one were to kill a scrounging pretty face, it should be a lot easier. If you fail this time, it will be hard for me to explain things to my master. Besides, my master also said there should be a hero protecting this young man. Don't take him lightly just because he is a pretty face. You must give it your all, understand? The butler earnestly reminded. The mercenary's face grimaced. A hero? What level of hero? Master didn't say it, you'll have to investigate it yourself. Besides, when the time comes, you must schedule more people to take action. If they have 10 people, you should send 100. Even then, he may still have the chance to escape. But what if you have 10,000 men? You could tire him to death. The mercenary twitched, but sir, isn't 10,000 people in a city a bit exaggerated? That's what I mean, I don't want to see any mistakes happening again. Moreover, be sure to maintain the confidentiality. The people you send out should preferably be unidentifiable. Don't let the people from the palace check and find out anything. Yes, we'll make sure to handle it. The butler nodded slightly, he had said everything he needed to say, and whether it would work out later, was beyond his control. By the way, have you prepared the tiger whip I asked for last time? The mercenary immediately took out a wooden box from under the table. It's prepared, the whip of a blue crystal tiger, still with the testicles. Not bad. I'll take it with me later. Okay. The room once again fell silent, and the two began to eat their food while chatting about irrelevant matters. By the time they left the pub, night had already fallen. Fang Hao and Angia had a few drinks, while Aceti and the guards were still performing their duties. Once the whole group was full, they didn't plan on continuing to wander around. They walked through the streets, hailed a carriage and returned to their place of dwelling. Once they had returned to their residential area, the streets began to quiet down. Upon entering their place, Angia enthusiastically carried her purchases upstairs to show off to Lori. Whereas Fang Hao looked at the makeup set and clothing he had bought. He ascended the stairs, heading upstairs. As he approached Rebecca's door, he saw a maid exiting from the room. City Lord, the maid bowed respectfully. Is Rebecca resting? The lady is about to rest, the maid continued. I bought her some things while strolling on the streets today. Might as well give them to her now. Let me inform the lady. The maid turned around and entered the room again. Not long after, she returned. She wore a smile. Sir, the lady invites you in. Fang Hao pushed the door open and stepped in. Inside the room, Nightstones were shaded by lamps. Silver moonlight streamed through the windows, casting light on a disheveled Rebecca, who was seated on the bed in her nightgown. "It's late in the night, and here you are causing trouble again." Fang Hao placed the items he bought onto the table. Upon seeing the items, a trace of surprise surfaced on Rebecca's face. "You bought things for me?" I happened to pass by the Fairy Dream Tower today, so I bought some stuff for you." "Humph, so you do have a heart." Chapter 681. "Well, I think of you wherever I go, and when I see something that suits you, of course I'll buy it for you," said Fang Hao unabashedly, sitting down beside her. He knew how to speak words that would charm a woman. The impact of those words, however, often depended on who said them and when they were said. If he had said such words when he first met Rebecca, she would likely have been disgusted, maybe even wanting to chop his head off. But now, she only blushed and didn't make any dramatic reactions. "I never realized that you're so good at sweet-talking people," Rebecca blurted out, her cheeks flushed. Her loose neckline allowed him to glimpse the softness beneath, partially obscured by a jade pendant. In fact, Rebecca had a habit of sleeping nude. Back when he pretended to be a flamboyant fashion designer, he had once witnessed her sleeping in the buff. He hoped that wonderful habit hadn't changed. "It depends who it is," he retorted. "Why would I sweet-talk just anyone?" "Humph. Fine, I have accepted your gift. I have things to do tomorrow and need to rest early." Rebecca moved to shoo him away. "Oh, what are you doing tomorrow?" "I'll have Aceti accompany you. It'll be safer." Rather than leaving, Fang Hao instead moved from his chair to sit on the edge of the bed, staring intently at the disheveled beauty before him. Rebecca, unnerved by his gaze, curled her blanket around her chest and scooted back a bit timidly. Initially, she wanted to scold him, but it seemed her words didn't faze him at all. She clenched her teeth, realizing that without offering him something, he wouldn't leave. Just for a moment, then hurry back to rest. "I really do have things to do tomorrow," she said after a moment's thought. As soon as she finished talking, she leaned forward and planted a quick kiss on Fang Hao's lips. The moment their lips touched, Fang Hao was about to hold her when Rebecca pulled away. "Okay, hurry back now. I need to rest." Fang Hao blinked, covering his lips as he said, "Humph, I actually wanted to chat with you. I didn't expect you to take advantage of me. I've been treating you like my elder sister, and yet you entice me. Wait for me. Next time, I will definitely pay you back." With a confused expression on her face, Rebecca watched as Fang Hao feigned victimhood, stomping out of the room after a menacing threat. "You wait. I will return to take my revenge," she retorted. He did not listen and departed, repeating, "Wait for me, I'll definitely come back for revenge." And with that, he left the room. Back in his room, Angia and Lori had returned after showing off their new clothes. When Lori looked envious, Angia was quick to give him her flower fairy honey Fang Hao had bought. She made sure to emphasize that it symbolized their friendship. Lori was moved, despite not knowing how to use it. But at its price, he knew it must be something special. He was so moved he nearly cried as he hugged Angia's leg. Angia looked pleased and promised to take him along next time. Inside the room, a nightstone illuminated the space. Angia was prancing around in her new dress. The Fairy Dream Tower's clothing certainly had an ethereal quality to it. Yet, when Angia wore it, it didn't quite have the same effect. It did look good nevertheless. Ding! A message notification came through from the Book of Lords. Upon opening it, he saw that it was a message from Dong Jiayu. "Brother Hao, the dwarves scouts are frequently investigating my side. I suspect the dwarves are planning to take some action." Fang Hao sat on the bed replying, "What about Belerga's blueprints? It's been several days since he promised to have it done." Belerga was supposed to be etching the blueprint for the musket. But even after a month of research, nothing had been etched. He had asked Dong Jiayu to remind Belerga last time and was told it would be 3 days. Today was the 3rd day. Dong Jiayu replied, "I have just been to Belerga. He said he could have it done by morning. Hopefully he won't change his mind this time." "How are your arrangements? Any intel from the dwarves?" Dong Jiayu, the undead led by the Black Sword have amassed an army of 1,000,000 soldiers. I have consolidated 12 lords to participate in this upcoming war. These 2 days, we have been preparing armors and weapons for the skeletons and soldiers. Immediately, a second message came in. In comparison to human beings and orcs, dwarves have a limited population. However, besides 8 Peaks Mountain, there are 12 fortress cities equipped with defensive arms. Thus, I am afraid this war will take a long time. Wars are brutal and costly, especially with winter approaching. If it were not for the ambitions of the dwarfs, Dong Jiao would not have wished to start a war at this time. After all, to recruit soldiers, transmigrators also needed various materials like soul crystals. Although she did not know how Fang Hao recruited so many undead, she knew it wasn't without cost. If you use them all up, security gets compromised. It's fine. If the dwarves aren't afraid, then why should we be? The undead don't need food and aren't afraid of the cold, so we can wear them down, Fang Hao replied. Hee. Brother Hao, you're right, I'm not afraid of them either. Fang Hao continued, I can't hurry back, so you need to take care. I'll arrange the heroes from each city to support you. Dong Jiao replied, okay, we can handle this. We can't have you handling every little problem. Chapter 682. Fang Hao, okay, send me the Belerga blueprint as soon as it's ready. Understood. After saying this, the two ended their conversation. Fang Hao lay in bed, taking out the sound-transmitting shell, and sent messages to several heroes nearby. He instructed them to consolidate their forces and move to the borders of the desolate battlefield to assist Dong Jiao in her attack. Angia went to find Lori again. The autumn night outside the window was peaceful. Rebecca lay in bed, tossing and turning. Suddenly, she opened her eyes, damn kid. She had been in bed for a while, but she didn't feel sleepy at all. Her mind was full of Fang Hao. Since she couldn't sleep, her gaze fell on the gift on the nearby seat. She sat up and first opened the wooden box labeled Fairy Dream Tower. When the box was opened, several bottles and jars appeared before her eyes. Even though she was seeing them for the first time, she knew that they were cosmetics made by transmigrators. In Silver Wing City, the products of Fairy Dream Tower were very popular among women. After fiddling with them for a while, she closed the wooden box again. She then opened the next package. In the package was a long dress with a blue background and silver threads. The fabric and craftsmanship indicated its high value. However, the style of this long dress was something she had never seen before, different from any other dresses she had worn. The craftsmanship is good, and it's quite pretty, but the style is a bit strange. Muttering to herself, Rebecca picked up the long dress and held it up in front of the mirror. She loved the color blue, especially bluish-gray. In her residence in Lyss City, blue decorations are seen everywhere. Fang Hao, who had made clothes for her before, naturally remembered this. Looking at herself in the mirror, she nodded in satisfaction. She then undressed right away, ready to try on the new dress. As her nightgown slid to the ground, her curvaceous body was exposed. Just as she was about to unfold the long dress, a piece of ivory, lightweight fabric fell out of it. Rebecca, with her quick reflexes, caught it with one hand. Oh, what's this? At first, she thought it was a handkerchief or a piece of display fabric. But this fabric was much larger than a handkerchief, with neatly finished edges and a blue floral pattern printed on it. Clearly, it was not just a piece of scrap fabric. It was obviously another piece of clothing. She quickly realized what this fabric was for as she held it against her body. She looked down at her chest, her face instantly turning a bit red. This was a bust wrap. Rebecca had elf blood in her veins, and even though she was only half elf, her beauty and figure were outstanding. Especially her abundant chest size, which presumably would make even elves envious. After all, the elves in the legends were well-known archers, and having two big breasts would hinder their archery, wouldn't it? Rebecca usually wore a bra made by the Bone Textile Store, and she would wrap an additional layer of white cloth around it when practicing swordplay, to prevent it from moving around. But this piece in her hand was another kind of breast wrap. It was soft to the touch, and the craftsmanship was exquisite and beautiful. These transmigrators sure have a lot of tricks. The mirror was a bit small, so she adjusted its angle. She figured it out on her own and put it on. Soon, the white wrap was on her body. She stood in front of the mirror and took a careful look. The fit was perfect up and down, although width-wise, it seemed a bit narrow. Leaving her back bare was one thing, but from the sides, it merely covered the majority of her round breasts. The sides of her full chest were exposed. She tried pulling it a little to the left to cover it up, but that revealed even more on the right side. Pulling it to the right, exposed the left side. She simply stopped adjusting, as long as the center was covered. She stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself for a while, feeling a bit embarrassed but unwilling to take it off. She usually didn't like to wear clothes to bed, so wearing this would be just right. She got back into bed and dove under the covers. She continued to daydream. The next day, at noon, Rebecca began to get ready. Apparently, she was going to visit someone from the Hall of Justice, and she had even prepared a gift. Fang Hao arranged for a Seti and a few Lionheart Knights to accompany her to ensure her safety. From the bandits, they had learned that the Marshall family was targeting Rebecca. The security issue needed to be considered more comprehensively. After sending Rebecca off, Fang Hao didn't leave his residence. After lunch, Dong Jiayu traded him the blueprint of Dwarven bolt-action white steel rifle, blue quality. It was finally completed. Delight surged in Fang Hao's heart. The long-awaited rifle blueprint was finally edged out. This type of rifle was what he needed, but its pros and cons were very clear. The bolt-action rifle required reloading after each shot, so its firing rate was not faster than a bow and arrow. The same was true for its power. In the Trade Alliance's shop, he had seen a purple weapon-grade bow, made from ancient wood and animal tendons. In terms of fire rate and power, it was much stronger than this type of rifle. But to draw this kind of bow required strength that not everyone possessed. In modern times, people were afraid of guns. Your power in this world could become heroic and acquire divine power. The firing mechanism of the rifle also limited its power. But the advantage of the rifle was its consistent damage. Its simple activation method meant that even ordinary farmers could have certain combat power once they were equipped with a rifle. It was particularly suitable for the large number of skeleton archers in Fang Hao's control who were not of high level. Chapter 683. Hand over the blueprint. Fang Hao immediately had someone clear a space in the backyard. Using wood and leather, they constructed a simple large warehouse, blocking all the city lines around. Fang Hao stood inside, opened the Book of Lords, and began to make bolt-action rifles. Dwarf bolt-action fortified white steel rifle, hard tough wood 2, fine iron 2, white steel ingot 3, metal parts 52, precision parts 35. Description: a long-range firearm developed by dwarves. It has improved the way of loading bullets to make up for the slow loading speed of the dwarf musketeers. Goodness me, it requires so many precision parts. Fortunately, before leaving, he got the blueprint for the precision parts from the dwarves through Deng Bin. Otherwise, even with the blueprint for the rifle, he wouldn't be able to mass-produce them. First, produce enough precision parts. Then start making rifles. Set the production quantity to 10. Hundredfold Amplification triggered, received 1010 dwarf bolt-action fortified white steel rifles. Whoosh! A large burst of light flashed, and bolt-action rifles appeared from all around, scattered all over the ground. Because the space is limited and he's afraid of being seen, he could only make a lesser amount each time. After handing over these 1010 rifles to Dong Jiayu, Fang Hao continued his production. Again 1010 pieces, sent over to Dong Jiayu. This process repeated more than 100 times. In total, over 100,000 rifles were handed over to Dong Jiayu. Thanks, Brother Hao. What about the bullets? Fang Hao continued to produce a large quantity of bullets and handed them over. He made as many bullets as possible, in order to prevent a scarcity of bullets at a critical time. The bullet production is completed. Fang Hao then proceeded with the production of first-generation field cannon. This kind of cannon is large and heavy, belonging to the earliest cannons possessed by the human clan. The modified version now would definitely be some lighter. Fang Hao made 101 cannons, and handed them over to Dong Jiayu. Wow, wow! Brother Hao, you have this thing too, my goodness, you're amazing! Dong Jiayu expressed his astonishment. Fang Hao replied, I don't have the blueprint for the shells, only 52 shells, you plan how to use them. Without the shell blueprint, these 52 shells, that were obtained from the Life-Taker lair, were stored in the storage space of the Book of Lords. Now, he passed them all to Dong Jiayu at once. But it seems like Dong Jiayu isn't worried, saying, that's no problem, we've discussed it already. Dwarfs are good at using firearms. Once we break through a fortress, we can seize cannons and shells. Now with your cannons, it's going to be even easier. Well, it seems to make sense that way. Dwarfs will use firearms once they engage in wars. Win once, and they can acquire the other party's firearms, creating a situation where war supports war. But the premise is that you can defeat the dwarfs. Alright, be careful. Try to capture as many dwarfs as possible. Let Belarga persuade them. Right now, population is also a resource, Fang Hao added. Ah? Oh, alright. I'll remember, Dong Jiayu answered. The two ended their chat and went about their business. Fang Hao walked out of the temporary warehouse. He told the guarding soldiers around to dissipate. At this point, Angia, with Lori in tow, ran over excitedly. Fang Hao, let's go. There's nothing in the afternoon. I heard of an interesting place and I want to take you there. As Fang Hao was walking back, he asked, what place? It's called something like Chinatown. Chapter 684. Colney Grand Theatre. Oh, my dear. You might suspect that stars are torches. You might suspect the sun changes position. You might suspect that truth is a lie. But my love has never changed. On the stage, the male actor holds the female actress's hand, looking deeply into each other's eyes, reciting their lines aloud. Below the stage, the auditorium is filled with ladies and socialites. They are eagerly watching the new play introduced by the theatre. The middle of the auditorium is the best place to watch. Rebecca and a similarly beautiful woman sit side by side, attentively watching the most recent program at the Grand Theatre. The beautiful woman's name is Olivia, a deeply rooted noble in Silver Wing City. In her youth, she married Doherty, the leader of the Hall of Justice. Rebecca met her when they were younger, and though all these years Rebecca has been pressured by various forces, Olivia has not spoken on her behalf. But maintaining their close relationship, appearing together in public, is already a kind of statement. Why, the cosmetics from Fairy Dream Tower. I've never seen you use these things, Olivia whispers. Rebecca's gaze remains on the stage. I heard that the stuff from Fairy Dream Tower is good, so I just bought it to try. Really? It wasn't your young husband who gave it to you? Olivia tilts her head, looking at Rebecca's face. Her red lips are glamorous, and she wears a simple eyeshadow, which makes her already beautiful face dazzle even more. That's none of your business. Rebecca gives her a glance. See, I told you, I knew you wouldn't notice Fairy Dream Tower on your own. It was him who bought it for you, wasn't it? You even used it, seems like you fancy him quite a bit. Olivia's face is filled with joy at discovering something new. Rebecca does not refute her, she simply watches the performance on stage seriously. Olivia doesn't continue either, and the scene is calm for a long while. It's only when the second act begins that she continues. The church hasn't done much in recent years. They hardly care about cities harassed by the undead lately, focusing on seizing power instead. You really don't need to be so stubborn about this, maintaining your own position is enough. When Olivia says this, she is clearly sharing information with her friend. If Rebecca disagrees with the Federation's decision to seize power, her position will be in jeopardy. After all these years, her position has been precarious. It seems that she holds great power, but in reality, it's unstable. What does your husband say? Rebecca asks quietly. Olivia doesn't answer, and there is silence for a while. When she speaks again, she has changed the conversation. You know about the transmigrators, right? A lot of the new plays in this theatre are provided by them, all of them pretty interesting. Rebecca answers. She didn't press for more information. Chinatown. Unable to resist the constant nagging, Fang Hao took Angia, Lori and Dimitrija out of their residence to Chinatown. This iconic name lets one know its meaning immediately. Chinatown is not as large as a commercial street, but it's particularly lively. All kinds of snacks with oriental characteristics and some strange and bizarre items can be seen here. They fill the entire street. There are many transmigrators, some who develop forces and build their own cities. There are also no small number of people who give up their cities and bring materials into the city for a comfortable life. Each person's opportunity is different, as are their choices. At a barbecue stand. The owner is a tall thin middle-aged man, he wears a Xinjiang cap and speaks with a southern accent. While grilling kebabs, he chats with Fang Hao. How's business? Can these people eat barbecue? As the owner flips the skewers, he says, it's all right, you'll always make something when you set up a stall, and it's just enough to get by. More than just getting by. You must earn quite a bit. Forget it, I think you're the impressive one, you've got 2 heroes at your side. Looks like your territory is developing well. Unlike us, who've lost our city and can only wake up early and return late to make ends meet. Fang Hao glances at the heroes beside him and answers, "Oh, I came with my city lord." These are all his guards. Realizing, the owner understands. Recently, a large number of outlanders have gathered in the city, all of them attending the federal conference. And Fang Hao should have come with his city lord. That's not bad then, in this world, as long as you can live and eat enough, that's enough. Don't think too much. Yeah, by the way, boss, I just got here and I don't know much about this place. What do you think, who holds the power in this city? Fang Hao continues. The owner is taken aback, looks around warily to see no one nearby. He lowers his voice. The Silver Wing city power distribution is quite complicated, with 3 major influences. 3. Fang Hao had heard from Rebecca that there were only the Hall of Justice and the Church of Light. How did a third one come up? The Hall of Justice, the Church, and the Mages Association. The owner adjusts his round hat and says, "Mages? There are mages in this city." Fang Hao becomes even more curious. Of course, they say this Mages Association holds significant influence. They also serve as the magic regulatory agency, overseeing all mages. Anyway, you'd better not provoke them. The owner continues to explain. The path of the mage is even harder to tread. Chapter 685. Every mage is a scholar, who needs to read a vast amount of material and literature to study magic. Similarly, a mage's skills possess immense destructive power. If 2 warriors fight, a pub might be ruined. If 2 mages fight, not only the pub would be gone, a huge fire might burn for 3 days and nights. This is why mages need special supervision. Oh, I've got no reason to upset them. Fang Hao smiled, indicating that he was merely inquiring. The boss nodded and continued, "The Hall of Justice is the force that controls this city. We are able to set up stalls and live here in the city, thanks to the Hall of Justice." Mentioning the Hall of Justice, a trace of a smile appeared on the boss's face, seemingly having a good impression. About the church. The boss's face changed instantly and looked around again. "You should know about the church, they have their temples in all cities. They have very extreme beliefs. They used to consider us as heretics and were about to cleanse us in the name of their god. The people from the Hall of Justice intervened, otherwise, they would have gotten their chance. So, you should keep your distance from them. Do not even go to the temple when you're ill, or they might misinterpret your words, accuse you of a crime, and burn you at the stake," the boss warned seriously. From the conversation, it was clear that the boss was not only wary but also had a dislike for the church. The actions of the church were polarizing. They built temples to treat the injuries of ordinary residents, but their actions were quite extreme. Fang Hao nodded to indicate his understanding, and then he switched to another topic. "Oh, by the way, I went to the Fairy Dream Tower a few days ago. I heard that their boss, Sister Li, is pretty amazing." "Ah, Sister Li is much more than amazing. Do you see this street? It was all negotiated by Sister Li. Otherwise, do you think the natives would have let us set up stalls?" Fang Hao looked at the bustling street. "Really? Of course, the boss had put some seasoning on the skewers. Here you go, these are yours. Would you like some beer? We have that too." Angia and Lori enthusiastically run over and take the skewers. "No drink for us today, we drove here. Maybe next time," Fang Hao said with a smile and led the group away. The boss waves at them. "Ahoy, don't drink and ride. Good habit." Fang Hao also waved back and set off into the distance. As dusk approached, Fang Hao and others got on the carriage to return to their lodging. On the way they made a detour to have a glimpse at the Mages Association. Only at this late hour, the main door was tightly shut, and they didn't get to see inside. Surprisingly, they managed to get some books related to magical knowledge at the entrance. One of the books was about thunder elemental magic. The carriage returned to their lodging. Angia and Lori went to tinker with the stuff they had bought. Fang Hao returned to his room and began to examine the magic books he had bought. He had a previous experience of learning fire python skills from books. Despite the initially hard to understand magic terms, he has mastered a lot of them himself. Even when coming across unfamiliar symbols and terms, he could look up one of his reference materials for translation and interpretation. Finally, after scanning the first few books, Fang Hao's gaze fell on the last book, Eye of Thunder Spirit. Phew. Finally on to the last one. I hope this book will allow me to comprehend magic, even the most insignificant will do. After a mental prayer, he began to flip through the book. At the sight of the opening page, he quickly became serious. He began to flip through the pages one after another. After reading through the theoretical knowledge, he found the recorded spells towards the end of the book. Thunder Spirit is a summoning skill of an air elemental spell. Just like the Wood Guard Spirit he currently possesses, except their functions are not the same. The Wood Guard Spirit serves in combat, or to protect the spellcasters. According to the book, the function of the Thunder Spirit's purpose was for reconnaissance. A look of joy appeared on Fang Hao's face, saying, "Perfect, it can replace the skeleton sparrow." Apart from that, in Silver Wing City, under the watchful eyes of the church, among the city's guards, one could see the church members assisting in the patrols. If he continued to use the skeleton sparrow, there was a risk of detection, which could lead to trouble. But using Thunder Spirit in the future poses less of a problem. Even if caught, it wouldn't reach a point of no reconciliation. Indeed, knowledge is power. Fang Hao scanned the book from start to finish, started to digest the knowledge in his mind. Perhaps due to the divinity of Lord of Thunder God that he had absorbed, he had a natural understanding of thunder elemental magic. He recollected the knowledge that he had just learned in his mind. He began to channel the power of magic as instructed. Feeling the power accumulating bit by bit, the magic started to take shape. Gradually, in front of him, stood an owl formed from silver arcs of electricity. It truly was a success. Delight surged within Fang Hao's heart. He immediately wanted to use the next ability, Shared Vision. However, with a sudden snap, the unstable Thunder Spirit Owl disintegrated into multiple arcs of electricity, scattering all around. What just happened? Fang Hao's smile instantly disappeared. Despite successfully activating his skill, it was too unstable. He reopened the book, combing through it to identify any potential errors made. 2 hours passed. Fang Hao spent them all in his room, meticulously cross-referencing against his magic book. There was indeed much knowledge he needed to further understand, requiring him to use other books for reference. Identifying the cause of the Thunder Spirit's disintegration was likely going to take some effort. Then, the sound of a carriage drifted in from outside the window. His room had a great view, enabling him to see the front door and courtyard from within. A quick glance downward and he saw Rebecca's carriage returning. Soon after, a knock sounded at his door. "Enter." The visitor was Rebecca's maid. After a quick courtesy, the maid said, "Sir City Lord, the lady requests your presence in preparation for a banquet tonight." "A banquet?" Fang Hao touched his stomach. Having indulged himself in considerable fare earlier in Chinatown, he doubted he could eat much more now. The maid continued, "Yes, Lady Olivia is hosting a private banquet and has personally extended an invitation for you." "Me? Who is this lady?" "Olivia is the wife of Doherty, the leader of the Hall of Justice. She shared a close relationship with the old city lord," the maid continued to explain. "Oh, all right, I understand now." With the explanation, everything clicked for Fang Hao. Rebecca and Olivia were bosom friends, and this time she had brought him, her husband, along. Of course, introductions had to be made. Upon their arrival, Rebecca had told him he could disregard some of the noble parties, as they weren't always obligatory. However, this invitation from her close friend was truly an offer Rebecca couldn't refuse. So she had decided to bring Fang Hao along. "All right, I'll prepare and come along with you all later." However, the maid smiled faintly, "Sir, the lady has sent us to assist you." With that, she stepped aside and let in 2 more maids. They began to help Fang Hao prepare his banquet attire. Leaving his room, Fang Hao had several formal attire prepared for himself. After selecting his outfit, the maids assisted him in donning the form-fitting nobleman's attire. He had worn such attires back in his territory, aided by Ira and her team, but being touched here and there by the maids made him slightly embarrassed. When the dressing process was completed, Fang Hao followed the maids downstairs. In the grand hall on the first floor, he saw the already prepared Rebecca. She was in a dark blue figure-hugging dress, adorned with golden patterns. Her graceful figure was sketched out beautifully with an elegant line. Below the tight pencil skirt, her sexy legs were wrapped in a pair of black stockings. The shimmering glow of the black stockings was striking that pearlescent shimmer on the surface. Nightfall, a name Fang Hao recognized at first glance to be the stockings. It was the Nightfall, a product of the Bone Textile store. Paired up with her fair creamy skin, shining eyes, and her lovely expression, Fang Hao couldn't help but to look at her more than he used to. Graceful yet delicate. Rebecca was just as he knew, attractive yet untouchable as the city lord's wife. Then she noticed Fang Hao's gaze, she glared back at him and said, "Why are you giving me that look?" Fang Hao gave a faint grin, "You look really beautiful tonight." Chapter 686. Fang Hao and Rebecca boarded the carriage. The guards formed a protective circle around the carriage, which began to head towards the location of the banquet. Inside the carriage, Nightstone exuded a soft glow. Despite being in close proximity, Fang Hao's gaze still lingered on Rebecca. The gown was tailor-made for her. On her, it fit impeccably, with not a wrinkle in sight, accentuating her curves to perfection. The patterns embroidered with gold thread lent the dress an added air of noble elegance. Her slender legs, encased in the dress of Nightfall, were particularly noticeable as they shimmered in the soft light. Noticing Fang Hao's gaze, Rebecca didn't seem as shy as before. She smiled and said, "This dress is quite nice. The craftsmanship of your textile shop is indeed impressive. As long as you're satisfied, ma'am." Rebecca rolled her eyes at him, continuing, "A dress like this, if sold in the city, would be more popular than Fairy Dream Tower's clothing." Fang Hao nodded, "Yes, tonight you'll have to promote our products among those noble ladies. I don't have much interaction with those people." "No worries, there is no rush with the store matters." Fang Hao was unconcerned. The carriage journey continued. Rebecca spoke again, whispered, "You are the owner of the Bone Textile store and the registered leader of a mercenary group in Lyss City with over 1,000 people working for you. We met when we were hunting No Face and we ended up together." "Oh, I get it." He understood this was Rebecca briefing him on his assumed identity. His capabilities far exceeded that, but certain things best remained unsaid. And they had to keep their stories straight. "I have known Olivia since we were young, we were quite close back then and have remained so until now. The only person I truly look forward to seeing at these annual affairs is her, so don't take it to heart if she nags you a bit," Rebecca continued. "So, your only good friend is very concerned about your marriage." "Well, it's not so much concern, just that once you're married, they should meet you, right?" Fang Hao tentatively asked, "So? Does she know that you're not into men?" Rebecca furrowed her brows, looking at him in puzzlement. "I don't think so." "What do you mean?" Fang Hao blinked, "Oh. I see, you didn't tell her. You're hoping to take advantage of her." Rebecca's expression registered surprise, shock, and confusion. She was stumped, not understanding how the conversation had taken such a sudden turn. And then he came out with that line. Her face darkened, her mouth agape with indignation. She wanted to slap his face, but their tight clothes made it impossible. So she lifted her foot and stomped on his. Angrily, she said, "Are you out of your mind?" The banquet was being held at a mansion in the central district. Once they'd arrived at the mansion, they could see other carriages heading the same way. These must be the other invited noblemen. Unlike Fang Hao's carriage, these ones only had 1 or 2 guards at most. On the road, a city leading more than 20 horsemen following Fang Hao had been stopped twice by patrol guards. Upon reaching the mansion, having handed over the invitation, the guards stayed at the entrance of the mansion. Rebecca, arm in arm with Fang Hao, strode into the mansion. The mansion was incredibly vast and extravagantly decorated. Inside the courtyard, the greenery was still lush, and the original flowers had been replaced with vigorous plants that could thrive in autumn. With careful pruning and tidying, the courtyard gave off a vibrant feeling. All of these were cultivated with the help of a wood elemental mage. "It's quite expensive as they don't last for long," Rebecca tugged at Fang Hao's arm and pointed at the flower garden. Fang Hao was taken aback. Mages, in any society, were granted high status. They were forbidden from doing manual labor and were to be protected during battles. Yet here, the management of the mansion relied on mages, which was completely absurd. Those mages actually do these kinds of tasks? Isn't it said that mages are very proud? Fang Hao, arm around Rebecca's waist, asked quietly. Rebecca squirmed a bit, replying, "She is Doherty's wife. It's only natural that the mages wouldn't say anything." "Are you implying something?" "The grass in my backyard has grown taller than a person and I didn't need a mage to cultivate it." "Humph, you're great, okay." The two casually sparring as they walked. After crossing the courtyard, Entering the main building, they were met with an even more magnificent sight. The lush carpet that lined the hallway, the lustrous white marble walls, the gold and silver adornments interspersed amongst white stone, the blue curtains gently swaying in the breeze. The entire building exuded an aura of noble elegance. The banquet hall was a blaze of light, with soothing music wafting through the air. The elegantly dressed men and women nobles were holding wine glasses, engaged in lively conversation. The entry of the two arm-in-arm naturally attracted the majority of the people's attention. However, it was strange that after a few cursory inspections of Rebecca, the crowd immediately returned to their own conversations, with not a single person even acknowledging their presence with a nod. "It seems that you are not very popular," Fang Hao muttered under his breath. Rebecca's expression didn't change. "They don't matter," she said. The pair took their seats on a sofa. Chapter 687. With the music playing in the background, Rebecca was softly introducing the dignitaries present at the gathering. There were established nobles and well-known merchants from the city. Though it was not a formal gathering, under the personal invitation of Olivia, many influential figures of the city had arrived. As it wasn't a large-scale banquet. It didn't take long, Olivia made her appearance, escorted by a group of middle-aged noble women. She first delivered a few public remarks before descending to engage in enthusiastic conversations with some of the nobles. Not much later, Olivia, with her entourage of noble women, walked towards Rebecca, all smiles. Olivia herself was quite striking. She carried herself with dignity, dressed in a long pale purple dress, with an emerald gemstone necklace adorning her neck. She was different from Rebecca. Olivia's beauty was mature and intelligent, full of elegance. Despite her well-preserved appearance, her age nearing 40 was evident. Contrarily, Rebecca embodied a timeless beauty, a combination of vivacity and fullness. The other noble women, when compared to the two, fell short by quite a bit. Despite their dazzling array of jewels, their looks and demeanor were not in the same league. "Rebecca, is this your husband?" Olivia asked as she approached, her eyes roaming curiously over the young man standing before her. As she surveyed him, she nodded approvingly, as if quite satisfied. Her gesture was akin to a girlfriend's mother seeing her daughter's boyfriend for the first time. "Ahem." Rebecca cleared her throat lightly and said, "Olivia, this is Fang Hao." She turned to Fang Hao and introduced, "This is Olivia." In total, 5 women had arrived. Apart from speaking to Olivia, Rebecca ignored the rest of the women completely. But the other women also pretended not to notice and maintained their pleasant smiles. All of them were sizing up Fang Hao. Fang Hao stood up, and greeted, "Fang Hao. It's an honor to meet Mrs. Olivia and the beautiful ladies." Olivia quickly returned the greeting as well, "I'm pleased to meet you too, Mr. Fang Hao." Olivia had already been informed about Fang Hao's identity. Still, to the other women, this gave them reason to look at him afresh. They had noticed Rebecca's accompanying man earlier, and were impressed by his appearance and manners. But because he looked younger, even younger than their own children, they did not think much of it. However, seeing Olivia's reaction and hearing recent rumors about Rebecca's change of husband, they quickly caught on. In fact, it's quite liberal here. A woman marrying a younger husband isn't unusual, it's just less common. Olivia took a seat next to Fang Hao. "Mr. Fang Hao, are you a transmigrator?" Fang Hao sat straight, "Yes, my city is near Lyss City." Another woman questioned, "A transmigrator, hey? How strong is your city, do you have any industries?" Fang Hao shifted his gaze and responded, "The city's development is quite satisfactory, with a few thousand troops. We have opened a textile store, the clothing business is doing well." Another woman followed up, "What scale? How does it compare to Fairy Dream Tower?" Fang Hao smiled and replied as if a machine programmed to answer, "In terms of clothing, our business is doing better than Fairy Dream Towers." "Really? Even better than Fairy Dream Tower?" The women appeared skeptical. Fang Hao nodded, "The garments we produce are indeed more popular than those of Fairy Dream Tower. What Rebecca is wearing is our own production." At this revelation, all eyes were once again on Rebecca. Upon their arrival, they had noticed Rebecca's dress and the stockings she wore over her legs. These noble women decked in expensive and extravagant attire and jewelry. But Rebecca's dress was even more audacious. It highlighted a woman's figure perfectly. At this gathering, she was undoubtedly the center of everyone's attention. Not just the noble women. The men in the hall were also stealing glances at Rebecca. "Rebecca, Stand up and let us see, Olivia said, taking Rebecca's hand. Without refusing, Rebecca stood up and turned around for everyone to see. Isn't this a bit too daring? The fabric feels really nice to touch. The craftsmanship isn't bad either. How did you achieve this glossiness? Initially, the other noblewomen who had accompanied Olivia had started surrounding Rebecca and engaging in conversation. Rebecca quietly answered their questions and introduced the matters related to Bone Textile Store. Suddenly, the distance between them seemed to lessen. Olivia found the dress that accentuated the figure particularly intriguing. But she was more curious about the young man sitting next to her, who was clearly about the same age as her son. How did you and Rebecca meet? Olivia shifted a bit closer to Fang Hao to inquire. At that time, I was setting up a mercenary group in Lyss City. We worked together to annihilate the Faceless, and thus grew close, Fang Hao continued answering. Olivia nodded. This is the first time I've seen Rebecca admire a man so much. You must treat her well. Fang Hao shrugged. She's in power, you should be telling her to treat me well. Olivia chuckled, finding Fang Hao's reply entertaining. Chapter 688. After chatting with Fang Hao for a while, Olivia pulled Rebecca along. Let's go to the room and try on your dress. Rebecca was somewhat uneasy about leaving Fang Hao. Nevertheless, she was led to a room on the second floor by a group of noblewomen. Apart from Olivia, Rebecca became the second person to garner attention from the noblewomen. After Rebecca left, Fang Hao was alone. None of the noble old men were willing to chat with him. All the seats around him were taken. He alone occupied an entire row of sofas, which was somewhat awkward. Putting down the wine glass in his hand, Fang Hao walked straight to the window. A breeze blew in from the window, which was refreshing. Tap tap tap. At this moment, the sound of approaching footsteps came from behind. Glancing sideways, a tall woman with a bob haircut approached. She wore a burgundy dress and exuded an aura of a capable, strong woman. Judging by her features, she was a transmigrator. He just didn't know whether she got in on her own or, like him, used her relationship with a noble to attend the party. The woman walked straight to the window and stood beside Fang Hao. Mr. Fang Hao, the woman tentatively asked. Do you know me? A smile came to the woman's face. Hello, Mr. Fang Hao. Allow me to introduce myself, Li Rong, she said, extending her hand after. After shaking hands with her, Fang Hao also guessed her identity. Li Rong of the Fairy Dream Tower, a formidable businesswoman. She utilized her transmigrator identity to set up the Fairy Dream Tower, which was about to dominate the entire noblewomen market in the city. So, it's you, Sister Li. I've heard a lot about you. This surprised Li Rong a bit. It wasn't hard to guess Fang Hao's identity. Identifying the woman beside him as the lady of Lyss City, it was certain the man was Fang Hao. But she didn't expect Fang Hao to react so quickly and correctly guess her identity. Mr. Fang Hao, you flatter me. I am nowhere near as famous as you, Li Rong modestly said, waving her hand. Surviving is what matters, the rest of the reputation doesn't matter. Fang Hao leaned against the window, continuing to look outside. Exactly. Li Rong agreed. The two then chatted about Fairy Dream Tower and cosmetics. Li Rong had previously been in the cosmetics industry, developing her own products and manufacturing them in her own factory. After arriving here and getting in touch with the high-class ladies of Silver Wing City, she began to remanufacture cosmetics. The product was not as good as the modern ones, but the ingredients used were more eco-friendly, all extracted from plants. Fang Hao listened and nodded in agreement. In fact, luck was very important when transmigrating. Now that Li Rong was in Silver Wing City, her situation could be said to be pretty good. But if you put her in orc territory, her knowledge of cosmetics would be useless. She would have been cooked by the orcs by now. The two weren't very close. After a few exchanges, they fell into a brief silence. Li Rong reached into her low-cut dress, drawing a small box out. In front of a surprised Fang Hao, she opened the box, flicked it slightly, and 2 cigarettes popped out. The cigarettes were roughly finished and had no filter. She must have made them herself. Li Rong naturally handed one to Fang Hao. However, he shook his head and didn't take it. Li Rong took out a lighter and lit one for herself. After taking a deep puff, she slowly exhaled a puff of pink smoke. Li Rong took 2 puffs and continued, Mr. Fang Hao, are you interested in exploration? Fang Hao nodded, sure, what's up? Li Rong said, "It's just a coincidence, I've recently obtained a map. I'm afraid I might be in danger if I explore it on my own. I was wondering if you would be interested in the exploration. We could split the spoils equally. Do you have any information about it?" "Details are scant, all I know is that the enemy is of dark creatures." Chapter 689. Dark creatures? This piqued Fang Hao's interest. If Li Rong has a map, it is likely of the area surrounding Silver Wing City, and wouldn't be far away. The Church of Light has its stronghold within Silver Wing City. The Church's top experts gather there. How could there be dark creatures nearby? Fang Hao continued asking, "Near to Silver Wing City?" Li Rong nodded, "To the east of Silver Wing City, there's a pond. If you delve into the pond, you'll reach an underground palace, that's the place I am talking about." She provided detailed description, including all the significant landmarks. If this information is true, Fang Hao could arrange for someone to find this pond in the east and find the subterranean palace she mentioned. "You're being so detailed. Aren't you afraid I might go by myself?" asked Fang Hao, leaning against the wall. "I trust you, the number one player in the channel will not do something like this. Even if you did, I wouldn't mind as I myself can't conquer that palace anyway." Li Rong replied indifferently. Truth be told, she had helped many people in Silver Wing City due to Fang Hao's influence. She vividly remembered the 20th day after migrating the forced mission of Demon Rat Invasion. Fang Hao had sold a large quantity of equipment in the channel at a fair price. Additionally, the saying about helping each other to survive together. Her domain managed to hold out until now, gradually showcasing her own unique talents because of the equipment from Fang Hao. Without the items provided by Fang Hao, she would have to invest more effort in equipment and resource supplies. The Fairy Dream Tower might not have been possible. That's why she doesn't believe Fang Hao would abandon her after hearing her information. Fang Hao naturally doesn't know Li Rong's thoughts. However, he was somewhat surprised at Li Rong's determination. No wonder she could hold her ground in this Silver Wing City, and the transmigrators in the city respect her as Sister Li. "Since they are dark creatures, have you considered the church?" Fang Hao continued. "Ha!" Li Rong sneered, "I'm scared they will find an excuse to tie me to the execution platform and burn me into ashes as I exit the palace. Is the church that dreadful?" "That depends on who you are, and how they treat you." Fang Hao nodded, finding her explanation reasonable. "Do you have information about the monsters' ranks and numbers in the palace?" "No, I also acquired the map and the information by chance." "So, do you want to give it a try?" Li Rong turned back towards him again. Fang Hao didn't continue asking. He stayed silent, contemplating whether to trust Li Rong and explore the underground palace. He probably wouldn't be busy before the federal conference. "How far do we have to travel from Silver Wing City?" "It would take at least until the next day due to the distance from here." "All right, let's set off tomorrow." Seeing Fang Hao agree, a smile appeared on Li Rong's face. She softly said, "Tomorrow is not possible. I have negotiation meetings with some gangs tomorrow." "What about the day after tomorrow?" "Sure, let's add each other as friends. We can communicate using the Book of Lords." "Great." Li Rong immediately put out her cigarette, took out the Book of Lords, and sent a friend request. Fang Hao also did the same. After they became friends, Li Rong's smile became even brighter. While the two were chatting, the banquet suddenly quieted down. Olivia, dressed in a gorgeous purple gown, slowly descended from the second floor, accompanied by Rebecca and a few noble women. Standing at the bottom of the staircase, one could see Olivia also had a nightfall stocking on her leg. It seems that Rebecca gave her the stocking. But it also didn't seem like a loss for Rebecca. After all, Olivia was also attractive, having a mature and charming appearance. It was quite a feast for the eyes. As soon as Olivia appeared, all eyes were on her. After all, these noble merchants came here not just for the meal. After sharing a few brief words, Olivia declared the start of the banquet. Upon arrival, they didn't feel hungry. But now, they felt bouts of hunger. Everyone began to take their seats and the maids started serving dishes. Rebecca stayed by Olivia's side, occasionally glancing in this direction. Meanwhile, Fang Hao was eating and chatting with the newly acquainted Li Rong. Primarily because, other than Li Rong, most people weren't interested in talking to him. If he remained silent, it'd be somewhat awkward. So, he found some topics to chat about casually. After finishing the meal, the night grew deeper. The music resounded again in the hall. Men and women began to step into the center. Following the rhythm, they started to dance. Seeing the scene before him, Fang Hao realized that these nobles danced after dinner. Aren't they afraid of a prolapsed stomach? At this moment, Rebecca also came over. Come on, let's go home. So saying, she naturally slips her arm into his. Fang Hao then bid goodbye to Li Rong. The two left the villa and got into the carriage. After some searching on the carriage returned to their residence. They each returned to their rooms. In the following days, more and more groups arrived at Silver Wing City. Walking on the road, you could see groups with various colored flags coming towards you. It's bustling like some festival activity. There are more city patrol teams on the streets than before, and if you are walking in the street with weapons, you are likely to be stopped and checked. Chapter 690. If there was no proof of identity, one would be enthusiastically taken away for a private chat in a small dark room. These past few days, there have been hardly any issues. Rebecca didn't attend the banquet, and during the day, several women would go to Fairy Dream Tower to learn about makeup in a group. Through gradual interaction, Rebecca and Angie's relationship improved significantly. Sometimes, if they found something fun, they would take Lori and run to Rebecca's room to show off. One morning, Fang Hao, accompanied by Dimitrija, visited the Mages Association. He understood the situation of the association but did not register to become a mage. There are many benefits to becoming a registered mage, such as participating in courses organized by the association, exchanging resources, and being assigned tasks. However, these were not very appealing to Fang Hao. The only thing that somewhat intrigued him was the mage course. Even so, he didn't want to register and be subject to the association's supervision. Moreover, he didn't want to reveal his capabilities. After buying some books near the Mages Association, he returned directly home. He locked himself in his room, continuing to decipher the magic spell Eye of Thunder Spirit, which he had not yet thoroughly researched. An office desk. Piles of opened books filled the entire desk. Fang Hao, in the middle of a small space, held a pen, recording the stages and feeling of mistakes in the spell casting process. Experiencing an active characteristic, the cycle of air elemental transformation and condensation, this word after elemental, what does it mean? He jotted this down and immediately began to flip quickly through a book on the side. Oh, elemental recombination. He jotted down all the knowledge bit by bit. 3 hours later, the sheet of paper in front of Fang Hao was crammed with words, documenting his shortcomings in spell casting. He put down the pen and started to cast magic again, carefully sensing the changes in the air elemental around him. He carefully transformed them into the form he desired. Gradually, an owl formed from silver arcs took shape before him. Seeing the owl take shape, Fang Hao felt delighted. Then immediately focused to prevent his mood from impacting his spell casting. Soon, the owl was fully formed, and Fang Hao felt as if he had another self. He could sense the owl's location and existence. Shared vision. The next moment, Fang Hao could see himself sitting at the desk and the owl in his eyes through the vision of the owl. Two scenes appeared at once, as if there were two images on one screen. Next, he continued to control the owl, causing it to fly out of the window and circulate around the building. The owl's vision was very clear. Not inferior to the vision of the skeleton sparrow at all. After circling around the residence, Angia and Lori were playing chess in a room on the second floor. Rebecca, alone on the fourth floor, was holding a gown and comparing it in front of a bronze mirror. She wore a white silk bralette that revealed a lot of white skin from the side. After watching for a while, the owl flew up again and returned to Fang Hao's room. The difference between the owl and the skeleton sparrow from an investigative perspective was not significant. If there were pros and cons to mention, the owl is not a dark species and, when released in Silver Wing City, would not attract attention. The skeleton sparrow, because of its undead affiliation, can speak through the sparrow when controlled, making it more convenient. All in all, having one extra skill was a good thing. Fang Hao was in a good mood after successfully casting the skill. He had Fule trade him some seafood, planning to reward himself properly. After dinner, Fang Hao received a private chat from Li Rong. After some discussion, they agreed to meet at the East City Gate the next morning and explore the underground palace together. There wasn't much to do for the rest of the time. He flirted with Rebecca for a while before returning to his room to rest. The next day, early morning, Fang Hao, Dimitrija, Angia, Lori, and 50 Lionheart Knights headed towards the north gate. Even though they only brought this few people, they were continuously questioned by the city patrol guards along the way. When they reached their destination, everyone was fed up with the questioning. Arriving in the north gate area, Li Rong was seen waiting from afar. Fang Hao, over here. Li Rong waved at them. As Fang Hao and the others approached, Li Rong's gaze landed directly on Dimitrija. Transmigrators have a stubborn fascination for high-level heroes. Even females, influenced by the in-game channels, aim to recruit high-level heroes. An orange lizardman hero and a blue orc hero. This was simply unbelievable. At the same time, she was glad about her decision to share the map with Fang Hao. Collaborating with such a powerful ally would bring many benefits to her future development. How come you're alone, didn't you bring any soldiers? Fang Hao asked, as the giant lizard approached. Li Rong stood there waiting on her horse at the gate, it seemed she didn't bring anyone. Oh. My troops are in the territory. Now, Silver Wing City has strict examinations, and mercenary regiments can't bring too many people in and out of the city gates at once. I'll lead you out first, and when we pass by my territory, I'll bring my people along, Li Rong explained. Chapter 691. Oh, let's go then. Okay. As the group rode towards the city gate, Li Rong presented her mercenary credentials. After explaining to the guard, she waved and exited through the city gate straight away. Once they were on a less crowded path, everyone spurred their horses and followed Li Rong towards her territory. As they departed the city, a scruffy middle-aged man with disheveled hair emerged from a corner. He wiped his greasy hands and pulled a sound-transmitting shell from his bosom. He whispered, "Captain, the kid has left the city with around 50 more people." After finishing his sentence, he awaited silently. Soon, a slightly hoarse male voice came from the shell, "Are there any heroes?" The scruffy man responded, "There's a lizardman wearing golden armor, most likely a hero." The hoarse voice sounded again, "All right, follow them and see where they go. I'll arrange for reinforcements here." Understood, Captain. The scruffy man stood up and walked out of the shadows. He pulled a horse from a courtyard, left the city, and followed the target from a distance. After a 3 to 4 hour long journey, a transmigrator city appeared in front of them. They didn't get too near, as a squad of horsemen quickly approached them from the city. They joined the marching ranks directly. These people were Li Rong's soldiers. There were over 100 of them, all equipped with armor and weapons, though there weren't many horses. Out of these, 20 were cavalrymen, the rest were warriors with swords and shields or ranged fighters. The troop number grew, but their marching speed was bound to slow down. The journey was excruciatingly dull. No incidents occurred, even when they deviated from the city's main road and delved into the dense forest, there were scarce wildlife sightings. They did, however, chat with Li Rong and learned many things about Silver Wing City during the journey. Li Rong, brimming with pride, also shared her future business plans. Her next step included expanding her business to various cities. These are, after all, the industries Li Rong plans to enter next. She aims to venture into catering, clothing, and even the tobacco industry. Especially tobacco, which she's almost finished researching and is less harmful to people than the cigarettes of her former world. If popularized, it would undoubtedly be a lucrative industry. At night, they set up camp outdoors. By noon the next day, they finally saw the pond Li Rong had mentioned. The pond was vast. Their arrival disturbed the animals resting and drinking around the pond. They hissed before scattering in all directions. Everyone dismounted at the edge of the pond. Dimitrija organized a defensive team. Meanwhile, Li Rong pulled out a box from her bosom, took out a cigarette, and lit it up. A puff expelled a rich aroma into the air. "Boss, this is the pond I told you about. We will rest a bit before going in. There aren't any dangers underwater, but I'm not sure about the palace inside." Fang Hao nodded, "Okay, let's leave a portion on guard above." The rest of the party began their pre-exploration rest. Soon, the water churned as Dimitrija emerged. "Sir, I found the palace entrance. Everyone just needs to follow the rope downwards." Good. Lizardmen were much better suited for underwater movement than humans. Li Rong's reported entrance was easily located, and a brief outer inspection revealed no immediate dangers. Next, Fang Hao made some quick arrangements. He left 20 people on the shore under Angia's command, while Li Rong kept 50. This precaution would prevent them from getting blocked if anything happened on the shore. Despite her reluctance, Angia obeyed Fang Hao's orders. She stayed behind, albeit unwillingly. Fang Hao didn't delay, he waved his hand, "Let's go. Dive following the rope. Don't get lost." Finishing his sentence, he grabbed hold of the back of the giant lizard. With a plop, he plunged into the pond. Chapter 692. The four-legged giant lizard is an amphibious mount. Its speed underwater is equally quick, and it's also very agile. Fang Hao single-handedly held onto the saddle of the giant lizard, descending rapidly along a hemp rope hanging from the shore. Glub glub. Bubbles sounded in his ears, a school of fish circled around them. Soon, their descent slowed. A massive stone cave appeared in front, and the giant lizard carried Fang Hao directly into the cave. After a while of swimming, they began ascending along the rope again. Above their heads, they could see a faint light. It seemed they had arrived. Splash! They emerged from the water. Fang Hao let out a deep breath. Dimitrija, holding a nightstone in one hand, pulled him out of the water with the other. "Pick up the others." Fang Hao patted the back of the giant lizard. Glug! The giant lizard dove again, going to pick up the remaining people. The distance they had to dive was no small feat. Those with poor endurance could easily have drowned. "Sir, we should be inside a mountain now." Dimitrija, holding the nightstone aloft, whispered. The dim light revealed jagged stone walls around them. Above them was damning darkness, where they could see nothing. On the right side of the stone wall, there was a huge stone cave, all pitch black inside. Before long, a series of bubbles began to appear on the water. The giant lizard emerged, dragging Lori and 4 Lionheart Knights. Fang Hao and Dimitrija helped them onto the shore. Straight after, more and more people surfaced. In their midst was Li Rong, gasping for breath, her face turning purple from holding her breath. Fang Hao pulled her up. "How are you? Are you okay?" "I was, suffocating." "What's wrong with your mount?" "I wanted it to take me along, but it deliberately avoided me." Li Rong panted, while complaining. On one side, the giant lizard's huge eyes glanced at them. It immediately turned back, coiled up, and laid flat on the ground. "It might not recognize you. When we leave, let it carry you a while." Fang Hao explained. Li Rong was indeed very suffocated. Her face had even turned purple. Just a few minutes later, and she would have drowned. "Okay, okay. All right, everyone, check your gear. We're getting ready to explore." Fang Hao called out loudly. At the same time, he opened the Book of Lords, pulling out a batch of bolt-action rifles. He distributed these to his Lionheart Knights. In Silver Wing City, Fang Hao had put all the rifles from the team into the demon space. This time, he distributed them again. The Lionheart Knights proficiently inspected their weapons. Once they finished distributing the guns, they started handing out nightstones, potions, and blasting caps. Li Rong and others stared, mouths agape, as the items were passed around. What the hell was going on? They had thought this was just an outdoor survival and underground exploration mission. Why were there 50 guns, along with an abundance of other tools? He distributed them to his subordinates as if they were free. Li Rong felt rather awkward as her group sat silently. She had thought she was doing quite well for herself, even if her hero was not as strong as Fang Hao, she still had her own large industry. She should at least have as much money as him. But now looking at the rifles and nightstones distributed like candy. Comparing the two groups, the difference was night and day. When everything was ready, Fang Hao said to Li Rong, "I'll use my skill to scout, everyone get ready." "All right, you're in charge," Li Rong said. Fang Hao nodded and flicked his fingers. An owl made of thunder and lightning took form beside him. Immediately after, under the watchful gaze of everyone, the owl flew directly into the dark cave. The thunder spirit owl had night vision. As Fang Hao shared its senses, he could see the situation inside the cave clearly as well. The cave was deep and dark. As they traveled further in, many winding, twisting paths appeared. If one rushed in, they could quickly lose their sense of direction. Since all the cave entrances looked the same, special markers had to be left at each one. Otherwise, it would be easy to mix up the paths and lose yourself inside. However, Fang Hao made some great discoveries. The mineral resources in here were incredibly rich. This was likely a gem mine, and once exploited, it could yield great quantities of gemstones. Once the exploration was over and the area deemed safe, he could negotiate with Li Rong, and they could jointly mine these minerals. The Thunder Spirit quickly found the main path to the deep end. As they moved inwards, the road turned into a single path. On the walls of the path, large amounts of mushrooms and moss began to appear. The mushrooms were the size of fists, completely white, with white tendrils similar to the lace of an umbrella along their edges. The moss covered a vast area, almost completely covering the walls and the floor to form a fungal carpet. Just like the fluorescent paint in the modern world, the entire carpet emitted a faint green glow. Mushrooms and moss grew together, becoming denser the further they went in. It looked like a progressively narrowing round tunnel. In this quiet cave and under the green glow, a chill ran down their spines. Among these fungal carpets, they could see some pale white crystals covered up. Shadow stones. It seemed this area was indeed under the control of the dark creatures. They passed through the area where the fungal carpet and the mushrooms grew. Chapter 693. The Thunder Spirit swiftly arrived at the depths of the cave. It was a vast space, roughly the size of a sports stadium. Mushroom mats and fungi did not grow here. Relief patterns could be seen on the walls of the hall, the lamp holders had decayed. Nightstones had fallen to the ground, still glowing faintly. There were even a few intact stone buildings, many signs of past life remained. It appeared as if this was a miniature city built underground. In the center of the grand hall, there were soldiers neatly lined up, kneeling on the ground. They hung their heads down, as if deep in sleep. Their armor had decayed, many of the connecting pieces fell off and now dangled loosely around their bodies. Upon closer examination, the type of soldiers was revealed. Bound Spirit Guardians, Tier 7. Seeing the names and ranks of these soldiers indicated that they were a military unit, and they still possessed combat power. However, what shocked Fang Hao was that every soldier in this hall was of the 7th tier. All of them were 7th tier undead soldiers. Undead soldiers, supplemented by the 7th tier, have quite formidable combat power. What's more, the number of bound spirit guardians here was not small, a rough count revealed nearly 300. Considering the size of his own troops, a battle would present significant risks. After completing the investigation, Fang Hao dismissed the magic. The Thunder Spirit Owl dispersed and disappeared. Fang Hao, feeling refreshed, opened the Book of Lords to review the map that had automatically recorded. He then called over Dimitrija and Li Rong. He spoke softly, "There are many forks in the path here, only one leads to the underground palace, the rest are dead ends." The map was drawn clearly. Numerous winding paths could be seen, there was quite a few. "Understood," Li Rong nodded. Fang Hao continued, "There are more than 300 7th tier undead soldiers in the underground palace." "Ah? So many?" Li Rong was taken aback. Although she knew the situation here should be dangerous, she had not expected the monsters to be this high of a level. They had reached the 7th tier. The 100 people she had brought were only of the 3rd tier and were at a disadvantage in this dark cave. All factors considered, they were in an inferior position. "Lord Fang Hao, what should we do?" Li Rong looked up at Fang Hao. Now if Fang Hao also didn't have a good solution, they could only retreat and swim back from whence they came. And come back to continue exploring this underground palace when they were powerful enough. Fang Hao thought for a moment, then discussed with Dimitrija. He suggested, "We can give it a try, if it doesn't work out, we can just swim back." "All right, what's the plan?" Li Rong didn't want to make a wasted journey. Without Fang Hao, she probably wouldn't be able to take down this underground palace in a year and a half. Fang Hao continued, "The passage leading to the underground palace has many forks and is rather narrow. We won't gain an advantage if we advance. The best method is to lure these undead out and block the entrance of the tunnel to attack them. Even if they are numerous, they won't be able to fully utilize their numbers." His plan was straightforward. At most, 3 to 4 people can move side by side in the stone tunnel. At its narrowest point, they might not even be able to raise their swords. They could block the tunnel entrance and attack with rifles. If it works, great. If not, they could jump into the water and swim back right away. Li Rong nodded, feeling that this strategy could be attempted. However, by doing so, she and her soldiers wouldn't be of much use. She didn't have any long-range weapons and simply cheering on the sidelines felt a bit inappropriate. After thinking for a moment, a glint flashed in Li Rong's eyes. She had an idea to extend Fang Hao's plan. Lord Fang Hao, I can trade for some combustibles. When these undead come out, we can burn them with a fire. Kerosene was a controlled item and hard to obtain. But finding substitute items shouldn't be too difficult. Fang Hao shook his head, this place is so stifling, we could suffocate from the lack of oxygen if we lit a fire. Even if the fire doesn't consume all the oxygen, the smoke could kill us. Oh, yet. Li Rong felt helpless. After seeing no other better solutions, Fang Hao commanded directly, Dimitrija, set it up. We will proceed with this plan. If it doesn't work, we will retreat immediately. Yes, sir, Dimitrija replied and began the preparations. Fang Hao's men were kept busy. They placed nightstones in the tunnel and set up many obstacles to slow down the enemies. Then, the Lionheart Knights took positions at the mouth of the tunnel. The front line lay down, the second row semi-squatted, and the third row stood up straight. Even so, there were only 4 soldiers who could shoot in each row. At the back of the guards, they placed a ballista aiming straight to the front. Sir, we're ready. Dimitrija spoke up. Fang Hao nodded. Arrange for someone to lure out those undead. Yes, sir. A scout was selected and went straight into the cave. Fearing that the scout might take the wrong turn and panic when he comes back, a rope was tied behind him. All he had to do was follow the rope back. After sufficient preparation, the scout took a deep breath and went straight into the cave. Everyone fell silent, anxiously waiting. Soon, from deep within the cave, hurried footsteps could be heard. Under the illumination of the nightstone, the rapidly escaping scout could be seen. He stumbled out. Get ready! Dimitrija commanded. A dense sound of footsteps came from deep within the cave. Soon, the bound spirit guardians, covered in rotting armor, appeared densely packed within the cave. Fire, Dimitrija ordered in a cold tone. Boom, 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 boom. The dense gunfire sounded, filling the cave with bullets. After the first volley, the front row of undead quivered a few times under the force of the bullets. But their steps didn't stop. Keep firing. Boom, boom. The gunfire continued. After the second round, some of the undead began to fall, but not rise again. The gunfire continued. The entire area echoed with gunfire, and the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. As for the cave, after several rounds of shooting, many of the bound spirit guardians fell. Observing above the cave entrance through the thunder spirit, Fang Hao noticed a new characteristic of the bound spirit guardians. In the hollow eye sockets, there twinkled blue flames. The bound spirit guardians that hadn't fallen, gathered up their dead comrades, and using them as shields, quickened their attack while warding off bullets. Their dark scimitars in hand, they chopped away at obstacles blocking their path. The shattered obstacles blocking the way were passed back to the other guardians and thrown into a side branch of the cave. This gave Fang Hao a start. Whether using corpses as shields or cooperating to remove obstacles, it meant that these undead troops had obtained high intelligence. Having such intelligence, and possessing the bodies of the undead, it would mean that they have attained immortality in a sense. Seeing that the bullets were not very effective. Soldiers, pull back. Crossbow carts, fire. Dimitrija ordered once again. The soldiers quickly retreated to both sides, making way for the front. Bang! A resounding bowstring sound echoed. An arrow as thick as an arm, with barbs at the front, shot out with a whistling sound. With the streaking sound of tearing air, it shot straight into the cave. Whoosh! The power of the dragon-locking crossbow was immense, a tool used to hunt the dragon clan on weekdays. In the blink of an eye, the arrow had reached the undead. Whoosh! Like skewering candied haws, it pierced through a whole row of undead. And the barbs at the front of the arrow, with added great force, shattered the bodies of these bound spirit guardians. Boom! In the end, the arrow pinned to the wall at the end. And the entire cave, apart from a scattering of 1 or 2 bound spirit guardians, looked almost empty. Seeing this scene, a surge of joy filled the hearts of all present. This proved that their idea was effective. If even dragon-locking crossbows were ineffective, they would have to retreat and swim ashore. However, now it proved effective, so cleaning up should not present any issues. Continue loading the crossbow carts, musketeers keep firing. A large number of bound spirit guardians rushed out from around the corner of the cave. This time, they moved quicker, picking up the bodies of their dead comrades. They blocked the bullets, and ran forward. Chapter 694. The shooting continued. Bullets poured down like rain into the cave. However, their power was far inferior to that of crossbow bolts. Although the bound spirit guardians were still falling, they were dying too slowly. Soon, the cave was once again filled with densely packed undead, crowding and charging forward. Dimitrija ordered again, "Gunners fall back, crossbow carts fire." Bang! The crossbow bolts once again whistled out. The undead along the route were instantly butchered. The surviving bound spirit guardians, who had narrowly escaped decimation, became targets for the trailing bullets. After several volleys, the cave in front of them was filled with the skeletal remains and equipment of fallen bound spirit guardians. And the orange bullets, and dragon lock arrows embedded in the cave walls. After this round, however, the cave fell quiet. No bound spirit guardians emerged, the entire cave was left empty. There was no sound either. Their preliminary estimate of their kill count hadn't even reached 300. That means that in the corners of the cave, where bullets couldn't reach in a straight line, many bound spirit guardians remained. It seems that the intelligent are harder to deal with. Fang Hao said. "Sir, the enemy has stopped pursuing us." Dimitrija, leaving soldiers to guard the cave, walked towards Fang Hao. Fang Hao nodded, "The count I've done is far more than this. I imagine these undead must have some intelligence. They know they can't run out, so they're hiding. Then, I will send someone in to take a look." Fang Hao shook his head, "I'll use the thunder spirit to take a look. Have everyone prepare." Having said that, he conjured up a thunder spirit owl once again. It flew on into the depths of the cave. Once it arrived at the corner, he saw that a large number of undead were blocking one side of the passage. Their icy blue pupils uniformly fixed on the airborne thunder spirit. But none of them stepped out from behind the corner. They just stared grimly at the air with their gloomy, frigid expressions. Fang Hao made the thunder spirit climb higher. Looking towards the depths from above, he roughly calculated the remaining number of bound spirit guardians. There were approximately 40 or 50 left. Then, Fang Hao tried to bait them again. These undead just wielded their weapons, hacking and chasing. But they still didn't leave. Seeing that baiting them was futile, he then controlled the thunder spirit to directly collide into the leading bound spirit guardian. The thunder spirit instantly shattered, silver sparks spreading across 3 or 4 bound spirit guardians, making their bodies shake uncontrollably. But there were no obvious injuries. After completing the reconnaissance, Fang Hao drew his sword from his waist and sketched a map of the internals on the ground. Pointing to the corner, "These undead are all gathered here. I tried to lure them out with the thunder spirit, but it was unsuccessful. So, they are waiting for us to enter then." Li Rong said. "Yes, the dragon lock crossbow cart cannot enter the cave at all. These undead are hiding there waiting on purpose, aware of this fact." Fang Hao propped himself up on his sword and responded softly. "What should we do then?" For the soldiers to maintain a straight line of fire, they would need to advance into the cave corner. The moment they positioned themselves to fulfill these conditions, they would only be around 4 meters away from the enemy. By then, if these bound spirit guardians charge out, even escaping would be difficult. Fang Hao remained silent. On the side, Dimitrija interrupted Li Rong's words directly, "Sir, I can lead the soldiers to charge in. With a few undead, it won't be a problem to deal with." Dimitrija was a combat hero. He was top tier in hand-to-hand combat within the territory. Moreover, he possessed strong combat skills. Fang Hao thought carefully, there were only so few bound spirit guardians left. Additionally, within the constricted terrain of the cave, it would also be challenging for the enemy to form an ambush. It should pose no problem for Dimitrija. After figuring it out, he said directly, "All right, have everyone prepare. Dimitrija will lead a few in, while we stay outside to assist." "Understood, sir." Dimitrija withdrew back again for the final preparations. Li Rong on the side didn't say anything more, but her gaze alternated between Fang Hao and Dimitrija. Not long after, Dimitrija emerged with 5 Lionheart Knights. "Sir, we are ready." "All right, be careful. If you find anything amiss, retreat. We will come up with another strategy," Fang Hao instructed. "Understood." Dimitrija waved slightly, leading the 5 Lionheart Knights, weapons in hand, into the cave. Fang Hao once again summoned a thunder spirit owl. He has it follow them into the cave. Dmitrija led the way, moving straight ahead along the cave road. The Lionheart Knights behind him, weapons in hand and nightstones on their waists, followed consecutively. The Thunder Spirit had night vision and could see clearly even in the dark. They finally arrived at the fork in the road. Without saying anything, Dmitrija entered, long sword in hand. The bound spirit guardians, who had been standing rigid, saw the living creatures enter. The soul fire in their eyes rose violently. Immediately after, they raised their weapons and lunged at the living creatures in front of them. Seeing the enemy charge, Dmitrija didn't change his demeanor at all. With the point of his left hand, he released the mark of the heretics, marking all enemies in sight. Kill! Once the marking was fully deployed, Dmitrija shouted and led the charge towards the enemy. Chapter 695. Straight ahead, a scimitar was high in the air, coming down hard. In Dmitrija's hand, a slight block with the long sword changed the direction of the scimitar, causing it to slash the undead companion by his side. The two undead stared in surprise for a moment, both turning their heads to look at each other. Before they could turn their heads again, a sweep of the long sword decapitated the two bound spirit guardians in front. Immediately after, Dmitrija's long sword transformed into flashes of light, continuously making skeletons fly before falling. His feet didn't stop, pushing quickly ahead. The Lionheart Knights following behind were also continuously swinging their weapons. They began finishing off and cleaning up the stray undead. Fang Hao stood outside the cave, though he couldn't see Dmitrija's attacking techniques and actions. But from above, he could see the skeletons' limbs flying and falling without ceasing. These enemies posed no threat to Dmitrija. Half an hour later, the sound of battle inside the cave weakened, the fight had ended. The narrow crossroad inside was now piled with the bodies of bound spirit guardians. From the mouth of the cave, stretching until it was out of sight. And Dmitrija, holding the sheathed longsword, slowly emerged with the 5 Lionheart Knights. It seemed that none of them were injured, only that the knights' breaths were somewhat unsteady. Taking large breaths of the surrounding air. Seeing everyone safely returning, Fang Hao also let out a sigh of relief. In any battle, his combat strategy was primarily based on overwhelming numerical strength. Although the heroes under his command were all very powerful, he never intended to let them take risks unless necessary. But today was different, they were too close to Silverwing City. He simply couldn't call on his undead army. That's why he let Dmitrija take the lead in clearing the remaining enemies. Even though Dmitrija could easily clear these out, life and death fights in an unfamiliar environment still brought the fear of unexpected incidents. Fang Hao let Dmitrija and others rest while turning to Li Rong and saying, "Li Rong, after it's cleaned up in there, let your people go collect the spoils of war and move out the skeletons." "Ah? Oh." Li Rong responded reflexively. Just now when she saw Dmitrija and 5 others safely returning, she was completely stunned. Didn't they say there were still 40 or 50 undead inside? How did they come back so quickly? And it looks no different from when they went in. But the sound of the battle did indeed disappear, and Fang Hao had no reason to deceive her. She couldn't help in the fight, so naturally, the cleaning work fell on her. She immediately called her people, "Come, everyone go in and clean up the battlefield. Separate the bones and the equipment." Swish swish. Li Rong's subordinates stood up one after another. They entered the cave with caution at first, and when they saw that all the undead had really been killed and there was no danger, they all swarmed in and began moving the bodies out. Soon, the cave was cleared. The platform by the lake was piled with disarmed equipment and bones. Fang Hao, from the side, made a certain number of bullets again. He continued, "Li Rong, the space inside the cave is limited. If too many people go in, it would be too dangerous to retreat. You should go in with me and let the rest stay outside." Li Rong knows the strength of her troops is noticeably inferior to Fang Hao's. So naturally she had no reason to refuse. She directly told her people, "You all stay here and move all this out." As Li Rong had more men, they began to get busy. They packed up the worn-out equipment and transported it out through the bottom of the lake. Meanwhile, Fang Hao's group began entering the cave. The bearskin could even feel a chill. They walked right in. The place full of mushrooms and fungi mats had been trampled into a muddy mess by the bound spirit guards. By the time they entered, there was no need to worry about these plants releasing any toxic gases. He ordered people to collect all the shadow stones around, and directly entered the underground palace. A football field-sized space was now completely empty. Empty and desolate, just like a haunted house. Spread out, see if there's anything valuable, and pay special attention to chests. Fang Hao ordered. The soldiers immediately spread out and started searching. Soon, reports came from all around. My lord, we've found many golden artifacts here. My lord, we've also discovered various burial goods here. Upon hearing this, Fang Hao inspected the two locations the reports had come from. He indeed saw many beautifully patterned golden tools, and on the other side, there were gemstones, decayed silk products, and a variety of jars and flasks. Looking at the designs on them, Fang Hao frowned, squatting down and picking up a piece of the goldware for a closer inspection. The patterns on the goldware were still clear and it was evident that the craftsman who made it was of top-notch skill. However, the patterns on this goldware were familiar to him. The same patterns could be found on the walls of the Viscera Museum as well as on some of Nelson's attire. It was indeed a place of the undead. The undead clan resembled extreme ascetic monks who believed that the physical world was ephemeral while eternal life was their ultimate pursuit. The current owner of these burial offerings was likely an undead of Nelson's status at the very least. Otherwise, according to the rules and order of the undead world, these types of objects couldn't be part of a burial arrangement. Look at this, like the proverb about making a wrong turn and saving it by coming out in front of your own house, muttered Fang Hao. The initial assumption was that it was a graveyard, where, over time, the corpses had transformed into the undead. This kind of transformation was most common. The ancient tomb that Dong Jiayuo initially explored was of a human king. Inside, there were hordes of skeleton soldiers, all transformed into the undead over time. However, looking at it now, it seemed this place was built by the orthodox undead themselves. Li Rong didn't hear Fang Hao's remarks clearly and asked subconsciously, "Hey? What dragon temple? Boss, are you saying that this place is a dragon temple?" Fang Hao returned the goldware, "No, it's nothing." He then looked around at the soldiers, "Have we found any treasure chests?" "Yes." Subsequently, a silver chest was lifted over by two soldiers and dropped onto the floor. Just silver, though. This disappointed Fang Hao. Besides, that wasn't right. According to the scale and defenses of this underground palace, there should have been more than those 7th grade guards. Could it be that he had analyzed it incorrectly? Were these gold and silver utensils all burial objects for these bound spirit guardians? Guard what burial? At this moment, Lori ran over quickly, excitedly announcing, "Lord Fang Hao, I've found a secret door. There are stairs leading upwards inside." Upon hearing this news, Fang Hao was delighted, the end was not here after all. There was a second floor. "Let's go, let's check it out." All the people moved in a formidable array towards the deepest part of this palace lair. At the dark end, a stone door was opened on the wall. Inside, there were stone steps extending upwards, with no end in sight. "Well done." Fang Hao rubbed Lori's head. "Hee hee." Lori shyly grinned, sticking out his chest, appearing proud for accomplishing a great task. "Prepare defensive measures here at the entrance, there should be enemies above." Dmitrija began to make arrangements. Various obstacles were set up at the door. Simultaneously, the soldiers formed a semicircle, guns pointed directly at the stone door. Fang Hao also constructed 2 crossbow devices. After everything was ready, he summoned the Thunder Spirit, which flew directly into the stone door, taking vertical flight up. It came directly to the entrance of the 2nd floor. The stone door to the 2nd floor was wide open, and inside was the same wide hall. Squatting bound spirit guards were arranged neatly. And at the end of the guards stood a large and burly skeleton. It was over 2 meters tall with a rusty sword in its hand. Its armor was damaged, and the cloak behind it was like tattered cloth, laying wide behind it. The skeleton sat upright on a stone seat behind them all. It was like a king, or like a general. Without saying a word, Fang Hao knew that this was most likely a boss. A complete intelligence scout. Fang Hao controlled the owl directly, hitting it against the body of the frontmost bound spirit guardian. The spreading electric current made the bound spirit guardian's body tremble. Clatch, clatch. At the same time, all the kneeling bound spirit guardians raised their heads in unison. Meanwhile, the giant skeleton at the very end, 2 blue flames suddenly appeared in its empty pupils. Roar! The giant skeleton roared furiously. All the bound spirit guardians stood at once, growling and rushing down the stairs. Chapter 696. Thump! 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 Dense, haphazard footsteps reverberated from the stairs. The footsteps approached, armor clashing and grinding together. Under everyone's gaze, the first bound spirit guardian rushed out, aimlessly shifting its head about. Upon seeing the humans directly opposite itself, it identified its enemy target. Following the first undead, second and third, countless bound spirit guardians, each brandishing a long decayed scimitar, appeared. They crammed themselves out from the stairway. They set their sights on the humans, letting out horrifying roars before they attacked. At the same time, Dmitrija gave the order, attack. Bang! Bang! Boom! A rain of bullets pelted down, and in the blink of an eye, the front row of undead fell. This was different from the initial concentrated fire by a handful of people at the entrance of the cave. Now, everyone was using rifles, making the bullet storm even denser. The damage inflicted increased exponentially. The undead that had just popped out were instantly turned into sieves. The progress was going smoothly. Li Rong, who was at one side, revealed a smile. It seems like there's no problem at all this time. Fang Hao shook his head, don't celebrate too early, there's still a boss on the second floor. Boss? Li Rong was startled. However, before she could question further, a large and imposing undead knight, donned in pieces of armor appeared in the doorway of the staircase. He clambered over the bodies of undead, bending over to step out of the door. Imperial Tomb Guard Gustav, Blue Rank 5 Hero. Just as expected, a hero. Moreover, a blue-ranked undead hero. Seeing the undead hero emerging from the door, dragging his rusted longsword across the ground, he started charging towards them. Fang Hao loudly commanded, keep firing. Bang! 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 Bullets unhindered by cost slammed into the undead hero's body. However, with a sound similar to a hailstorm falling, the broken armor on the skeleton hero's body was made even more shattered. Underneath the armor, the skeleton hero's bones were visible. Bullets passed through the gaps in the bones, embedding themselves into the wall behind. Seeing this scene, Fang Hao's eyes widened. Do skeletons have this kind of ability? To use the gaps in the bones to dodge projectiles like bullets? Good heavens, I've discovered another advantageous trait of the undead. No wonder it's so difficult to kill these bound spirit guardians. It's not that the power of the rifles is lacking, but the bullets just pass straight through the skeletal framework. Yet, the battle still continued. The barrage of bullets slowed the skeleton hero's approach. Its pale blue eyes swept over everyone present. The deep-rooted resentment hiding within the soul fire could be felt. With the skeleton hero drawing fire, the rest of the bound spirit guardians quickly charged forward. Fang Hao immediately issued an order, Dmitrija, you confront this skeleton hero, the rest continue firing at the regular undead. As soon as the words were spoken, everyone sprang into action. Dmitrija drew his long sword from his waist, meeting the skeleton hero head-on. Meanwhile, the other Lionheart Knights swiftly changed their positions, attacking the emerging bound spirit guardians from the back. The weapon used by the skeleton hero was a heavy longsword. Dragging it with one hand, the rusty blade grinned against the ground, resulting in a grating noise. Pale blue soul fire flickered. Its attention then turned to the approaching lizardman. Making a step forward and dragging its longsword, it moved towards the lizardman. As their distance closed, the skeleton hero's footsteps quickened. When it drew near, it transformed into a full sprint. The longsword in its hand dragged, creating a trail of sparks against the ground. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton hero was already within 3 meters distance. The longsword naturally lifted and began to slash towards Dmitrija's head. Ah! Seeing this scene, Li Rong involuntarily let out a shout. Subconsciously, her heart leaped out her throat. If this sword struck, not to mention a hero, even a rock would be split in half. Everyone was somewhat nervous. On the other hand, Dmitrija was as calm as ever. He calmly raised his longsword, positioning it horizontally above his head. Clang! The clash of the two swords resulted in a piercing resonance, quickly echoing through the hall. When the skeleton hero landed his mighty slash, Dmitrija did not yield even half a step. He effortlessly caught the slash. Following which, Dmitrija swept across with his longsword, deflecting the skeleton hero's blade. The skeleton hero felt its longsword uncontrollably deviate to one side. As for the lizardman's second sword, it was already halfway through its sweep. Fierce slash! A streak of flaming red light appeared on Dmitrija's longsword. It slashed towards the skeleton hero's skull. The skeleton hero felt its soul fire tremble. With a forceful stomp, its body leapt back, narrowly evading the sword. Seeing the hero in retreat, Dmitrija pursued after it, brandishing his long sword. His sword transformed into streak after streak of sword light, chopping vigorously to his rear. Meanwhile, the initially aggressive skeleton hero was now only retreating. The iron sword in its hand was held across its chest, struggling to resist the attacks. Dmitrija slashed violently, causing the skeleton hero to helplessly tilt backward. Another horizontal slash severed the skeleton hero's legs. 2 more consecutive slashes later, its arms were also cut off. This rendered the formerly imposing skeleton hero completely incapable of fighting. Simultaneously, the remaining bound spirit guardians were also dealt with. Chapter 697. The narrow staircase entrance was cluttered with bones of the undead. Li Rong knew what she had to do and quickly ran out to call her subordinates to start moving the items out. Meanwhile, Fang Hao approached the skeleton hero. He observed the skeleton hero whose legs and arms were broken, yet its soul fire still flickered. "Can we communicate?" Fang Hao, staring at it, asked. The skeleton hero didn't answer but kept its eyes fixated on the human before it. Fang Hao continued, "If you answer my questions, I won't kill you. Deal?" Again, the skeleton hero remained silent. This silence made Fang Hao doubt if this undead creature was incapable of speaking. Nevertheless, he persisted with his questions. "What is this place? And what are you guarding here for?" As he spoke, the skeleton hero's soul fire started to shimmer. A husky, grating voice echoed, "You will die here. You will replace us and continue guarding the imperial tomb." The emotions of the undead are limited. They fear death as well and know the feeling of rage. However, their physical limitations hinder these feelings from being potent. The hatred the humans feel is diluted in their hearts. The deep-rooted bitterness is nothing more than a mere sibling rivalry to them. Imperial tomb? Is this the royal cemetery? Who is buried here? Fang Hao continued to quiz. The skeleton hero chose to remain silent once more. Following this, Fang Hao asked a series of questions. No amount of threatening or enticing could make the skeleton hero utter anything beyond the first sentence. Fang Hao lightly coughed. He stood up, saying, "Good, I am satisfied with your answers. I agree to enlist you in my territory as a hero." At this, Li Rong was utterly stunned. Is this how heroes are recruited? No wonder Fang Hao has so many heroes by his side. She had learned something new today. The skeleton hero also turned to look at Fang Hao. Its raspy voice echoed once again, "I will not submit to you." As soon as it finished speaking, the soul fire within the skeleton hero extinguished rapidly. What remained was a heap of white bones. Fang Hao looked at the pile of bones on the ground, knitting his brows. How stubborn! Unlike the living, the undead can be recreated after death. In contrast, once the soul fire of the undead extinguishes, their bodies can no longer be transformed. This means Nelson cannot transform the dead undead into undead heroes again. Alright, collect his skeleton separately. It might come in handy, Fang Hao declared. Even in death, it's okay. The skeleton could still be used to create a DM doll. Meanwhile, Li Rong's subordinates had started shifting items out. After a short break, Fang Hao and his team resumed their exploration, advancing to the second floor once the staircase was cleared. The second floor was another stone chamber. Though smaller than the first, the decor was much more reminiscent of a miniature city. The surroundings were full of various stone buildings. The skeleton hero's throne was even accompanied by a stone courtyard. A check of the courtyard revealed that while most items had decayed, the layout was still remarkably complete. Thereafter, Lowry kept discovering passages to the next level one after the other. Each floor had its bound spirit guardians, which were systematically eliminated by Fang Hao using a consistent strategy. By the 8th level, Fang Hao and his team were starting to feel fatigued. There was no telling how many levels there were in total. Once each level was cleared, the entrance to the next one would be discovered. Each level was smaller than the last, with the level they were currently on reduced to an area of just over 100 square meters. Similarly, with each level, more and more golden artifacts were found. "Hurry up! Package the items securely in leather and transport them outside," said Li Rong enthusiastically, directing her subordinates from the entrance. All these gold artifacts. Once shared with Fang Hao, it would be enough for her to buy up all the shops in the commercial street. With that, she would truly own her own business. And the most surprising haul was the treasure boxes. One box per level had brought a smile to her face. Fang Hao wasn't very interested in these low-level treasure boxes, but Li Rong was. She rarely went on explorations and naturally hadn't seen many treasure boxes. Now there were 8. As per their previous agreement of splitting the haul evenly, she would get 4 boxes. Although she didn't contribute much, her crew did all the heavy lifting, plus she, a beautiful woman, had kept her blouse generously low, chatting with him. She surely deserved at least 2, right? As she thought about this, Fang Hao was already asking from the side, "Lori, is there a staircase to the next level?" The room on the 8th level was not big. Lori was examining the wall not far away closely. Without answering, he gently knocked on the wall. Splat! The sound of stones grinding against each other rang out. Accompanied by falling dust from the ceiling, a hole opened up on one side. There really is another one. This place was like a Matryoshka doll with bottomless rooms, always offering another one to discover. Inside the stone entrance was no longer an aged, dimly lit stone stairwell. Instead, there was a narrow, lavishly decorated corridor filled with thick dust. The corridor, less than 10 meters long, was lined with various gold tools and statues against the wall. The walls were adorned with colorful frescoes that hadn't faded much over time. At the end of the corridor stood 2 stone doors covered with symbols and designs. These doors were tightly shut. This should be the final layer. Chapter 698. The group peeked out the door for a bit. They didn't notice any danger. "Do not open the stone door at the end, be gentle, and move everything out of here," Fang Hao instructed softly. The hallway was not large, but it was filled with various statues made of gold. Not requiring Li Rong's people, the rest of the Lionheart Knights entered the hallway and started to move the golden statues out. Meanwhile, Fang Hao started to examine the patterns on both sides of the wall. The patterns were well preserved, the colors remained vivid. He could clearly understand the scenes and stories depicted on them. The more he inspected, the more nervous Fang Hao became. Judging from the scenes on the murals, this place was indeed built by the undead. This place should be treated as a tomb, but for the undead was more appropriately called a traveling palace. That is, a temporary residence or a place to rest. The owner of this traveling palace was a female undead. From the patterns on the mural, she seemed extravagantly dressed. Moreover, the depictions displayed female characteristics. Moving further in, Fang Hao saw kneeling corpse witches and funeral priests on the mural. This female figure held a scepter and looked down from her throne. Good heavens! She was truly a royal one. Even the corpse witches in the mural were drawn relatively small. They were insignificant background figures, accentuating the woman's majesty on the throne. If he had not recognized Nelson's attire, he would have assumed that all those kneeling were ordinary undead. After looking at everything, the entire hallway was cleared out. "Master, shall we open the stone door?" Dimitrija approached and asked softly. Li Rong also looked over. The treasures in the last layer should be of a higher grade. But Fang Hao didn't think so. He spoke softly, "This door cannot be opened, everyone wait for me at the entrance, we will exit soon." "Exit? Aren't we going to explore the stone door up front?" At this point, Li Rong also came over, a little reluctant in her voice. Having progressed this far, she was a little unwilling to exit. "There might be dangers we can't handle inside, we might all die in there." This statement was not to scare Li Rong. If the next level was unpopulated, it would be fine. But should the master of this palace be present, they all would be in danger. If they managed to escape, half of them would die. Fang Hao had the ability to teleport, but he couldn't teleport all these people. Besides, teleportation might not work against a truly powerful opponent. Ah? Is it that serious? Eventually, Li Rong retreated. Fang Hao didn't linger in the hallway either. He used the Book of Lords to capture the paintings on the wall. He sent them directly to Zhang Bin, asking him to take the pictures to Nelson. Everyone retreated from the hallway, closed the stone door, and withdrew. Coming out of the water body, Angia was guarding the water's edge with her people. Various broken weapons, gold and silver utensils, and burial items were piled up into 2 small hills. The gains were quite significant. Fang Hao used the Book of Lords again to create several wagons for transporting goods. They had been out for several days. Everyone was a bit tired and wished they could go back and rest immediately. They worked more efficiently. After packing, everyone immediately set off and began to return. In a forest, 100 miles west of the pool. Under the night sky, towering trees obscured the moonlight, dense forests spread out endlessly. Animal howls and bird calls came from time to time, making the rarely trodden forest seem even more deserted. Amidst this gloomy and quiet atmosphere, several voices of conversation arose. Are we going to ambush an army? They've brought nearly half of the people from our group, could it be Silverwing City's patrol team? Who knows? They were all relocated by the group leader, over 300, and all are skilled men. Probably, they've set their sights on a merchant group. Merchant group? We have so many people. Even if it were an army, we could stop all of them here. Off to one side, a disheveled mercenary, dressed like a beggar, was half crouched in the forest, wiping his iron sword. Hearing the endless speculation and doubts of his companions, he quietly spoke up. This time, the group leader's order is to kill them all, leave none. If we succeed, everyone will benefit. Kill all? How many of them are there? There are over 100 of them, all are militiamen with little power. We have twice their numbers, this should be an easy job. Upon hearing that there were just over 100 of them, everyone relaxed instantly. Fighting a smaller force, especially when they were just militiamen, was their strength. They could say that this mission had no challenge at all. As they chatted idly, a figure was seen running fast from the forest. It was the scout they had sent far away. Everyone went silent and listened to the information the scout brought back. They are almost here, over 100 people, and they have wagons on their way back. The beggar-dressed mercenary nodded. Let's make it quick. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. All drew their weapons and slowed their breaths. In the distance of their view, rows of torches began to appear far down the road, coming closer to them. Chapter 699. At night, as the autumn wind whistled, deep within the ancient mountains and forests, 100-person team urged their horse carriage along a small path overgrown with weeds. Fang Hao sat on the back of a giant lizard, looking at the map in his hand, occasionally raising his head to look at the somewhat gloomy night sky. Li Rong, how long until we reach our destination? Li Rong glanced at her own map. We'll probably arrive in about 3 or 4 hours. Good, everyone speed up. The sooner we return, the sooner we can rest. Yes. Everyone responded in unison, picking up their pace. The journey from the watering hole to Li Rong's territory was not a straight path, and they needed to cross mountains and navigate winding roads, covering several times the direct distance. Just as they were about to return, their spoils of adventure were significant. The soldiers had more energy and the journey proceeded at a good pace. Li Rong rode a horse alongside the giant lizard. After lighting a cigarette, she said, "Listen, big brother Fang Hao, I don't usually lock my door at night. Don't take advantage of that to do anything mischievous. After all, it'll just be the two of us in the whole building. Even if I call for help, no one will hear." After spending the past 2 days together and sharing an adventure in the underground palace, the two of them had become quite familiar with each other. Opinions about Fang Hao were diverse in their communication channel. However, after her own interactions with him, Li Rong found Fang Hao to be a powerful and easygoing person. She didn't feel any oppressive air of superiority from him. He was always game to joke around or even engage in some body banter. "What are you talking about, Li? I'm an upright person." Seeing that Fang Hao didn't understand her implication, Li Rong exhaled a cloud of smoke and continued, "Isn't it popular among young people to seduce older women? Don't you want to give it a try?" Li Rong was tall and attractive, but she was positively past her prime. She was definitely in the auntie category now. "Forget it, I wouldn't be able to handle it." Li Rong took a long drag of her cigarette and said with a smirk, "You're still too young, you don't understand the enticing allure of a mature woman. You'll have regrets." Fang Hao didn't respond, he continued looking into the Book of Lords. Whether he fancied older women or not. Mainly, he already had an even more mature woman at home that he hadn't even managed to handle yet. Thus they chatted casually. Soon the group had emerged from the narrow area and the road ahead became somewhat wider. Traveling could be monotonous, especially during the tiring night march. Li Rong was a talkative person and she became even more so as they grew more familiar. Before long, they were discussing her commercial plans. She said that when she was ready to open a store in Lyss City, Fang Hao should look out for her. In return, she said, whenever he felt like experiencing the charms of an older woman, he was welcome to visit her. As they strolled along, suddenly, Lowry at the front made a silence gesture. The signal was quickly passed back through the ranks. Everyone instantly fell silent. Holding their breaths and reaching for their weapons, they remained alert. There was absolute silence all around. In the thick woods, there was not a single sound, the quietness was eerie. Fang Hao drew his weapon as well. Without needing to ask, a soldier came running from up ahead. In a low voice, he reported, "My lord, Lowry says there's an ambush in the woods up ahead. He's unsure of the number of enemies." Hearing the soldier's words, Fang Hao also sensed something was off. Even though their numbers would deter most beasts, the forest should have been teeming with insects and birds. Why did all noise cease as soon as they reached this spot? This situation indicated some lurking danger in the woods that had scared away all the insects and birds. "Prepare for battle." Clatter. Everyone immediately reformed their ranks, readying themselves for combat. Bang! Just as they were preparing, a dull thud was heard from the front. A large tree crashed down, blocking the road ahead. Immediately after, the rustling noises came from the trees all around. Whoosh, whoosh. Since the team had not advanced towards the ambush point, the arrows only flew out from the woods diagonally ahead. Everyone quickly took cover behind the horse carriages. The Lionheart Knights began raising their guns, retaliating. Bang, bang. The Silent Night suddenly became tumultuous. A shootout began between both forces. Bows strained and guns fired, filling the entire forest with noise. Ahead, a few people in cloaks crouched in the dark woods. One of them curiously asked, "What's going on? How did they discover our ambush?" None of them even came close. "I don't know, they must have some special scouting methods. But it doesn't matter, we've got plenty of men this time. There's no danger in killing them." The shaggy man, bearing resemblance to a beggar, glanced at the shootout position again. He tersely said, "We can't afford to drag this on. If we attract a patrol, we're done for. Tell the guys to charge. We need to finish this quickly and clear the battlefield. No traces must be left." "Sure." One of them got up and relayed the message to their troops. Immediately after, "Charge!" Suddenly, cries of war sounded from all around, as mercenary soldiers of varying appearances charged out from the forest on both sides. They roared as they charged towards Fang Hao and his team. Fang Hao was already pondering who could be ambushing them. He even considered distancing himself from Li Rong, in case she had gotten into trouble somehow. Seeing these people charge headlong, he estimated their numbers near 300 to 400, which put him more at ease. Taking care of these men should not pose much of a problem. Chapter 700. Boom! 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 The bullets kept pouring out, and the mercenaries couldn't stand the power of the bullets, not with their physical strength. With each round of firing, a group of mercenaries fell. But there was still an overwhelming number of enemies. When the two sides were only 20 meters apart, Dmitrij drew his long sword and coldly ordered, "Everyone, attack! Attack!" Everyone shouted in unison. They switched to melee weapons and charged at the oncoming enemies. Li Rong's team was among them. They held their weapons and engaged the enemies in close combat. Fang Hao stood at the rear of the team. He summoned the wooden warrior spirit to restrict the movement of the enemy while keeping alert to the surroundings, just to be safe in case more enemies charged out from other sides. Obviously, Fang Hao was being a bit paranoid. Under Dmitrij's leadership, they made short work of those mercenaries, killing them like cutting through butter. The ground was littered with bodies, and blood pooled into rivers that flowed along the path. Up ahead, Lowry was coming over, holding a few men. "Sir, we caught these men spying from the woods ahead, they must be the leaders of these men." "No, we are not the leaders, not leaders." "Shut up." Fang Hao looked at Lowry and said, "Keep an eye out, let Li Rong's team clean up the battlefield, and bury all the bodies." "Yes." After Lowry was gone, the team got busy again. The injured started to bandage up, while those in good shape began to strip the corpses of their gear, then dug holes to bury them. Fang Hao turned his eyes toward the captured mercenaries. There were 3 in total. 2 of them wore mercenary armor, while the other looked more like a beggar. "Speak up. Who sent you? Tell me, and you might just survive." Fang Hao spoke to the captives. All 3 kept their heads low, remaining silent. Fang Hao approached the first one. "Speak. The man simply turned his gaze away. Fang Hao nodded, strong-willed. Thud. After a flash of cold light, the head of the first man rolled on the ground. The faces of the last two men fell in horror. Fang Hao then turned to the second man, speak. The second mercenary hesitated. When he saw Fang Hao take half a step back, he blurted out, it was our captain. He gathered us here to ambush you. Fang Hao halted and continued to question, what's your captain's name? The mercenary cautiously glanced at the beggar beside him and saw him keeping his head low. He gritted his teeth and said, our captain's name is Sander. Good, you did well. Fang Hao first commended him, then continued, why did he order to ambush us? I don't know. We do not even know who you are. We just came here following the captain's orders, the mercenary stammered out. Fang Hao nodded and took 2 steps back. Thud. Plop. A head dropped with a thud next to the beggar. By that time, the beggar was sweating profusely, creating streaks on his grimy face. So, you don't know anything either. Fang Hao looked at the last man. The beggar stammered, but couldn't manage to say much. Fang Hao didn't spare him either and turned to leave directly. The Lionheart Knight beside him swiftly executed the beggar with his blade. He then searched through the 3 bodies. The Lionheart Knight caught up with Fang Hao again. Sir, you might want to take a look at this. Fang Hao looked at what he held in his hand. It was a palm-sized seashell. Sound-transmitting shell. These mercenaries were well off. With the sound-transmitting shell in hand, Fang Hao thought of talking to the party on the other side. But he quickly dismissed the thought. Now that he knew the name was Sander, he could find out who he was easily. No need to waste more time on them. He kept the shell, and ordered, bury these 3. The injured will take the carriages. We keep moving. Yes. The convoy set off again, heading towards Li Rong's city. Along the way, Li Rong, who had been scared, recovered a bit. She lit up a cigarette and exhaled deeply. Were they Sander's men? Fang Hao glanced at her, noting that she seemed to have a strong addiction to smoking. You've heard of him. A couple of days ago, I discussed something with Sander. Things didn't end well. Li Rong spoke. Oh? You mean, these men came to kill you? What else? You just came here, Sander doesn't even know you. His target can only be me. Damn, this man is ruthless. Li Rong cursed angrily. Fang Hao frowned, he suspected that these might be the hired hands of the Marshall family. They weren't able to target Rebecca, so they've turned their sights on him instead. But according to Li Rong, she also had some conflict with Sander's people. Moreover, just a few days ago, Li Rong did postpone the exploration of the underground palace for some negotiation. Could it be that they were really targeting her? Tell me about Sander. Smoking her cigarette, Li Rong said, I don't know much about him. I just know that Sander too originated from a mercenary background. After his mercenary group's status was scrapped by Silver Wing City, he became a notorious hoodlum in town. I wanted to set up an additional business, and that required his approval. Does he have any background? His background is unclear, but he definitely has some. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in his current position. Li Rong continued. Fang Hao nodded, refraining from asking more. If what Li Rong said was true, the conflict between her and Sander wouldn't necessitate an ambush for such a trivial matter.